owner of the US Mega Farm. Este video es puramente para entretenimiento y no infringe derechos de autor en los derechos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 1026. Runway construction. The next morning, when Kinzu just came back from riding outside, the person in charge of the construction company came to the ranch villa with the designer. Mr. Clean, this is Mr. Gabriel, a senior designer of our company. Just tell him if you have any requirements. After entering the villa, when everyone sat down on the sofa, the person in charge of the construction company pointed to a middle-aged white man with long hair next to him. Well, after all, it is a European and American country, and it is normal to have more artistic talents. Kinzu looked at the middle-aged white man with long golden hair and couldn't help but comfort himself. Mr. Gabriel, the situation on our ranch may be a little complicated. Seeing that Kinzu didn't speak, Zumengyo, who was standing next to him, couldn't help but smile and asked, "Do you want to go and see the terrain first?" Of course. After Gabriel nodded, he glanced at Kinzu and said with a smile, "Mr. Clean, please assign me a guide so that I can get familiar with the terrain here faster." "That's no problem." Kinzu came back to his senses and waved his hand casually, and Erica immediately came out from behind. "Mr. Gabriel, this lady will accompany you to survey that terrain today. I hope you can come up with a design plan for me as soon as possible." "Okay, Mr. Clean, I'll try my best." After agreeing, Gabriel followed Erica out, but the light in his eyes made Kinzu a little unhappy. Is this guy still single? Seeing that the person had already walked out of the villa, Kinzu retracted his gaze and asked the person in charge from the construction company with some amusement. This seems to be it." Touching his nose a little embarrassedly, under Kinzu's oppressive gaze, this white old man who was almost 50 years old felt that the sofa under his butt was a little hot. The reputation of the Love St. Gabriel has long been no secret in their company. Although this guy has always claimed to be single, he has had at least 8 girlfriends. The reason why such a playboy was not beaten to death is also thanks to his mouth and his artistic temperament. Of course, superb skills in picking up girls are also indispensable. However, no matter how good you were at picking up girls, you still have to consider the occasion and the place. The white old man now has no other thoughts in his mind. The only thought is that he hopes that Gabriel can understand the situation. Although the woman is really good looking, it's a pity that the person standing behind her is not someone that these two workers can mess with. "Okay, I'm just taking a look." "Look how nervous you are." After glaring at Kinzu with some dissatisfaction, Zumengyo smiled apologetically at the white old man. "Mr. Brewer, I'm sorry to trouble you with the construction. You can contact us at any time if you have any questions." Okay, Mrs. Clean, in that case, I'll take my leave first." Standing up awkwardly, the white old man named Brewer greeted Kinzu and the others, and hurriedly chased in the direction where Gabriel had gone. However, when he left, Kinzu was a little embarrassed. It seems that he was a little too excited just now. He even forgot that Zumengyo was sitting next to him. "Well, Mengyo, how wide do you think our runway should be?" Kinzu asked for something to talk about. "How should I know?" Zumengyo shrugged casually, stood up, and walked upstairs, smiling. "You should ask the designer this question, why ask me?" This, touching his nose, Kinzu, who was choked back, could only watch Zumengyo go upstairs, not knowing what to say. Maybe it was because of Brewer's explanation, or Gabriel himself could see the situation clearly. Anyway, during the days of surveying the terrain, nothing unpleasant happened. It was not until 3 days later, when Gabriel came to Kinzu with a design drawing, that Kinzu finally put his mind at ease. "Mr. Clean, please take a look at these design drawings. If you are not satisfied with anything, I will modify them." After handing the design drawings to Kinzu very respectfully, Gabriel glanced at the expression on his face. Seeing that he was not dissatisfied, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. "Well, not bad." After casually glancing at the first design drawing, Kinzu nodded indifferently and asked directly, "If we follow this design drawing, how many days will the total construction period take? What is the budget?" This, Gabriel, who had thought he would face a complicated question, was a little confused by Kinzu's straightforward approach. He didn't know how to continue the introduction. Fortunately, he is a guy with high emotional intelligence after all. After touching his nose awkwardly, he took a small step forward and asked softly, "Mr. Clean, there are several other design methods below. Would you like to take a look first?" "No, just this one." Waving his hand casually, Kinzu took the design drawing in front of him and looked at it again, and said with a smile, "This design drawing is very good. No need to look at other ones, just follow this one." "Okay, Mr. Clean." Gabriel agreed respectfully, glanced at the design drawing in Kinzu's hand, and after thinking for a moment, he reported, "Mr. Clean, the design you chose is a dual runway and there are 2 hangars, so the construction time will be a little longer. It will take about 2 months to be put into operation." 2 months? Frowning, Kinzu muttered a little depressed. "This time is too long, right? Can't it be shortened?" Gabriel wiped the cold sweat from his forehead nervously, and smiled awkwardly. "Mr. Clean, this is because we need to build 2 hangars and a warehouse for storing fuel, so it will take a little longer." "Is that so?" He nodded depressedly. Since it was necessary to build necessities, Kinzu had nothing to say. He could only sigh and blame himself for not choosing the time. "By the way, Brewer, you haven't told me yet, what is the budget for this runway?" When Gabriel took back the design and was about to go back to debug it, Kinzu's voice rang around him again. After hesitating for a while, Gabriel raised his head and said respectfully, "Mr. Clean, if there are no accidents, the construction of the runway and the hangar will cost $3 million US. "Well, 3 million? It's not very expensive." Nodding with satisfaction, Kinzu was about to praise this guy, but heard him say again, "However, Mr. Clean, after the hangar is built, some necessary ground support equipment will probably have to be purchased by you yourself." Chapter 1027. Confused Christine. "What? I have to pay for it myself?" Kinzu touched his ear in confusion. Did he hear it right? He had to pay for these things himself? Doesn't that mean that the $3 million he spent was just to ask these guys to build 2 simple houses and 2 roads made of steel and cement for him? "Mr. Clean, this is it." As if seeing Kinzu's dissatisfaction, Brewer, who was following him, explained with a wry smile before he could say anything. "The construction of an airport is different from other buildings. The larger its main structure, the more materials it will need. Moreover, you are building a double runway, so the cement and steel bars consumed are an astronomical figure. In addition, your place is a bit remote, and the labor will be more expensive, so this price is not expensive." "Not expensive?" Kinzu curled his lips in disdain. Although he felt that what this guy said made some sense, it was impossible for him to believe that these guys did not make money. For example, the $3 million quoted, after deducting the workers' wages and material costs, the remaining profit is at least $600,000 or $700,000. However, although Kinzu understood it in his heart, he did not say it out loud. Just like what Brewer said, his place is a little remote after all, so it doesn't matter if the salary is a little higher. Since Kinzu has no problem, the construction of this airport was immediately put on the agenda by Brewer. "Mr. Clean, if there is no problem on your side, then we will officially start construction tomorrow." "Of course, there is no problem on my side." Shrugging indifferently, Kinzu smiled and said, "For me, the sooner you build it, the happier I am." The airport runway has officially begun to be built, but Douglas has no news about the plane. Originally, according to Kinzu's intention, since the runway has started, he will go to decorate his private plane. But after calling Douglas several times, this guy was busy and did not take him to see the plane. Now, Kinzu, who was already a little uneasy, was even more unsure. This guy won't really come to fool me, right? Scratching his head, Kinzu thought for a long time, and finally picked up the phone to call Christine. There is no way. Who made this girl Douglas's cousin? Maybe she knows about this. Well, although this possibility is infinitely close to zero, who knows if you don't try? However, Christine, who suddenly received a call from Kinzu, was a little confused after hearing Kinzu's intention. "Clean, do you think I know about this?" Christine scratched her head awkwardly. Although Christine also wanted to help Kinzu, she really didn't know how to do this. "Although Doug and I are cousins, this matter is related to the new model. Do you think you will show it off for no reason?" Well, Kinzu was a little disappointed when he heard this, but there was nothing he could do, so he could only hang up the phone in dismay. However, there is bad news and good news. Kinzu can at least be sure of one thing now, that is, Christine has nothing to do with this matter. For Kinzu, this is no less than a shot of cardio tonic, and his whole spirit instantly changed. "Boss, what are you doing?" The ranch was so noisy that the cowboys and O'Doom could not hide it. On the first day of work, the guys gathered around curiously. My girlfriend has been feeling unwell these past 2 days, and I have been busy and have no time to write. I will try to update every day in the future. Chapter 1028. The runway is in the way. Build a runway. When O'Doom and a group of cowboys heard that Kinzu was going to build an airstrip on the ranch, everyone looked at him differently. Needless to say, building a runway must buy a private plane, and it must be a jet. Speaking of private planes, this is not uncommon in America. Especially for slightly larger farms, they often buy one or two because of work needs. But that's just a helicopter. This kind of plane is as common in America as cars are in China. A cheaper one can buy a helicopter with good performance for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But business jets are different. Just the runway that is several hundred meters long for the plane to take off is not something that everyone has the conditions to build. What's more, if you want the plane to take off, the runway is only the most basic condition. After having a runway, you also need a skilled pilot and corresponding crew members. In this way, if you buy an airplane, you not only have to bear the usual maintenance costs, but also have to support a few more idle people. So, anyone who can afford a private jet is a super rich person. And what about Kinzu? In the eyes of this group of cowboys, although Kinzu, a yellow-skinned Asian, is rich, he may come to such a remote place to open a ranch. Even if he has money, it won't be too much. After all, who would be hard on themselves? If you have enough money, it would be great to stay in the big city with bright lights and wine and enjoy life. Why come to this place where no one lives? But the facts are always so unexpected. Kinzu is not only really rich, but he also really gave up the bright lights and wine life in the city and came to this place where no one lives. It seems that it was the right decision for us not to leave. Yes, the boss is so rich, and it seems that he treats us well. The future will be better. Yes, I guess those guys who left will regret it if they know this news. Several cowboys were still whispering here, but O'Doom had already walked up to Kinzu. Boss, if the runway is built here, it may have an impact on our future grazing. Is there an impact? Kinzu, who was still waiting for the workers to start work with great interest, was stunned when he heard the words. This place should be a little far from the pasture, right? How could it have an impact? Boss, this place is indeed a little far from the pasture. O'Doom nodded first, then pointed to the other side of the pasture and said, but this runway is between the two pastures. When we move to another pasture, we will definitely pass by here. This, touching his nose, Kinzu understood the seriousness of the matter without O'Doom saying anything more, and quickly waved to Gabriel on the side. Mr. Gabriel, the location of the runway may have to be moved. What? Gabriel, who was originally smiling, froze in an instant, and asked in disbelief. Mr. Clean, are you kidding? We are all ready. I'm sorry, Mr. Gabriel, I'm serious. Shrugging helplessly, Kinzu repeated O'Doom's concerns just now, and finally said with a smile. Although it's a pity, the runway really can't be built here, otherwise when the cattle move, it is estimated that there will be nothing left here. Well, it's really a pity. Listening to Kinzu's explanation, although Gabriel was unwilling, he still nodded helplessly and agreed. There was no way, the big boss said so, who could not give some face? Besides, it's just moving the runway to another place, not building it. Although it's a bit troublesome, for the sake of the US dollars that are about to be in hand, Gabriel feels that he can still hold on. With Kinzu's order, the workers who were busy preparing to start work were stunned. What the hell? Are you kidding? I just took down the things, and you told me that the runway needs to be moved. But in this ranch, Kinzu is the boss. Whatever he says, you have to listen to it, whether you like it or not. Of course, you can also not listen, but it is hard to predict what the consequences will be. O'Doom, you will follow Mr. Gabriel this time. Scratching his head, Kinzu regretted why he let Erica follow Gabriel at the time. If O'Doom had followed Gabriel at the beginning, this kind of thing would not have happened now. Clean, what's wrong? Has the construction started over there? After sending two guys to find a new location, Kinzu, who was a little bored at the construction site, simply rode Shibai back to the villa alone. Don't mention it, it's all in vain. Shrugging. Kinzu lay down on the sofa, raised his head and looked at Zumengyo, and explained what happened just now with a wry smile. There is such a thing. Looking at Kinzu with some surprise, Zumengyo smiled and said, Clean, I have to admit that your luck is really good. What's the use of good luck? I don't buy lottery tickets. Qinzhu curled his lips indifferently, changed to a comfortable position on the sofa, and asked with a smile. By the way, Mingyu, I forgot to ask, after you come with me, is there anyone in the accounting firm over there willing to come with you? Of course there is, you don't even look at who I am. Raising his eyebrows proudly, Zhu Mengyu said complacently. I didn't show up this time, and a few guys in the firm took the initiative to come up and wanted to come to Montana to work with us. Take the initiative to come to our door. Qinzhu looked at Zhu Mengyu curiously. When did this girl become so charming? Yes, I just got here, and their calls came after me. Shrugged, Zhu Mengyu's face showed some pride when she talked about this. Although her accounting firm has just been opened for a short time, her influence in it is already not small. Ha, this is a good thing. Touching his nose, Qinzhu did not bother about the purpose of these people chasing Zhu Mengyu, but smiled and said, since some people are willing to come, then let them come, the air tickets will be reimbursed and the salary will be doubled. Come now. Frowning her beautiful willow-shaped eyebrows, Zhu Mengyu asked in some confusion. You don't have a company here, why do you need an accountant? If they're over there, at least they can keep an eye on the situation of several stores. Mengyu, you don't know this, right? Qinzhu smiled and pointed outside. The ranch is so big and there are so many workers. If you don't find an accountant to come and do the accounts, are you going to do it yourself? I didn't say anything, Zhu Mengyu stuck out her tongue awkwardly. Thinking of all the troubles on the ranch, her head was a little overwhelmed. How could she have the energy to think about anything else? My friends, this is heartbreaking. Liu still loves writing. Well, writing loves me, and I love writing. Chapter 1029 Chain Mu's Little Thoughts. After receiving Qinzhu's instructions, the two accountants who were helping out in New York packed up their things and bought plane tickets that day, waiting to fly directly to Montana. Working under someone else is not as comfortable as working under the boss's wife. However, as soon as they left, Chen Mu called Qinzhu directly. Boss, why did you suddenly transfer them away? We are still short of people here. As soon as the call was connected, Chen Mu's complaint came over. However, Qinzhu didn't care about Chen Mu's complaint. If you are short of people, why don't you find a few more? This is such a simple thing, how can it be difficult for you? After being said by Qinzhu, Chen Mu was speechless, and could only say angrily, it's convenient for those two girls to use it. If we recruit new people, I don't know how long it will take to get familiar with them. I can't help you with this. Shrugging his shoulders, Qinzhu said jokingly, unless you go to ask Mengyu for people, I can't let them go back. Forget it, I'd better find two more reliable ones. Chen Mu directly rejected Qinzhu's proposal with a pout. What a joke. Let him ask Zhu Mengyu for people. It's okay for those who know that he is doing it for the abilities of these two women. But if you don't know, you might think that there is some secret between him and the two women. Besides, the main reason why he made this call was to remind Qinzhu to send two more accountants. Why? For peace of mind. Anyway, he is basically in power now, fully in control of Qinzhu's catering business in the whole United States. If he doesn't put two accountants to supervise, even if Qinzhu can sleep, he can't sleep. Although it is said that a person with a clear conscience is not afraid of his own shadow, it can't withstand the power of gossip. When there are more people gossiping, even if Qinzhu believes in him, he will always have doubts in his heart. In order to prevent this from happening, Chen Mu thought of handing over the financial power. In this way, with Qinzhu's own comfort and managing the money, he can do things more freely. If you don't have it, just ask for it. Anyway, there are records there. If you have any questions, you can go and see it yourself. Although Qinzhu didn't understand Chen Mu's thoughts at this time so deeply, he knew something about it. Therefore, after hearing his complaints, she smiled and comforted him. Don't blame Mengyu for ruining your reputation. The main reason is that we are short of people here. The most important thing is that we are too far away from the city and we can't find the right people at all. This is the only way now. They have already boarded the plane. Shrugging his shoulders, Chen Mu chatted with Qinzhu for a while after saying this, and then hung up the phone. Qin, what's wrong? Zhu Mengyu, who was sitting on the sofa next to him, looked up curiously after seeing Qinzhu hang up the phone. Hearing you talking about accounting, did those two girls make any mistakes? No. Qinzhu shook his head and said with a smile, it's that guy Chen Mu. You didn't say hello to him before calling him over. He is still a little confused now. This, Zhu Mengyu touched her nose a little embarrassedly. Okay, I was indeed negligent. What can I say now? What can I say? Just find 2 more. Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu smiled and said, there is not much in America now, but there are many people who can't find jobs. As long as you slightly agree to their conditions, you can find a lot of applicants, so don't worry. But, in this case, New York will be completely empty of our people, right? Zumengyo frowned a little worriedly. What's the matter? Kinzu waved his hand disapprovingly. I believe Chainmew will not let me down. While Kinzu and Zumengyo are still discussing Chainmew, this guy was hiding in the office and started making a phone call. What? You're in a manor? Okay, don't walk around, I'll be there soon. Standing up in a hurry, Chainmew didn't care that it was still working hours, picked up his briefcase and walked out. What? You want me to be an accountant? After hearing clearly what Chainmew was here for, a blonde beauty sitting opposite pointed at herself in disbelief. Yes, that's right. After nodding his head affirmatively, Chainmew smiled and said, not only you, but she can too. You two can go to work together. Is that so? The blonde beauty, who was about to refuse directly, couldn't help but glance at the woman next to her, and her mind became more active. If they couldn't go to get off work together, it's not bad. Boss, the location has been determined. Do you want to take a look? After lunch, Odom came to Kinzu with a dusty body and a little breathless. Have you found it? Where is it? Kinzu stretched lazily, stood up from the sofa, and said with a smile, it's just fine, let's go and take a look together. Odom would not and dared not refuse Kinzu's request, and saw this and led the way directly. This time Gabriel found a good place. Not only was it surrounded by dense woods, but even the most basic road could not be found. Are you sure it's here? Kinzu turned around in disbelief and looked at Gabriel who was following him. He asked with a smile, Mr. Gabriel, are you going to let me park the plane on the trees? No, boss, these trees have to be cleared away. Waving his hands, Gabriel said calmly under Kinzu's surprised expression, I found several locations, but only this one can be used now. We just need to clear the woods, and it will be much more convenient to build the runway when the time comes. Oh Broom, this location won't be in the way, right? Turning his head, Kinzu glanced at Odom who was following him, and said teasingly, if it's in the way, let's talk about it first, so that nothing will happen later. How could that be? Odom touched his nose awkwardly, and his expression was a little embarrassed. He stopped Kinzu from building the runway at the time, which was really just a subconscious action, and he didn't think too much about it. Now that I think about it, I am still quite brave, and I directly choked Kinzu back. Although a forest needed to be cleared for the safety of aircraft takeoff and landing, Kinzu did not say anything, but signaled Gabriel to call the workers back to start work. Anyway, it was impossible to rely on him. Kinzu would rather not repair the runway than do it himself, otherwise the money would be wasted. Thanks to the brother Yadayakonsingsi for the reward, thank you. Chapter 1030. Long lost system. The runway was being built in an orderly manner, but Kinzu found that he seemed to be idle at this time. Chainmew was in charge in New York. Although several new chain restaurants were opened, he didn't have to worry about it at all. Not only did he not have to worry about it, but Chainmew even called from time to time, saying mysteriously that he would bring an accountant to report the accounts. Kinzu was speechless about this. Aren't there just 2 accountants transferred from you? Is it necessary to hold a grudge? However, since Chainmew was come in, Kinzu did not stop him, but asked him to arrange his work and come at a time. After sending this guy away, Kinzu walked around the ranch again and found that he could not help much. When he was in Boston before, he could ride Shilabai to graze when he had nothing to do. But now, there are more than a dozen cowboys on the huge ranch, but there are less than 1,000 cows. They don't even have enough to share, so how can Kinzu have the nerve to join in the fun? What if these guys think that he despises them, then it will be more than worth it. Of course, this is purely Kinzu's personal imagination. In fact, the most important thing is that he is too lazy to go out for a walk. I don't know why, but Kinzu has been feeling weak recently. Regardless of day or night, he always feels that he has not slept enough. At the beginning, Kinzu thought that he was overdoing it. After all, it is normal for young people to be crazy and have no restraint. For this, he also suppressed his desire and held himself back for several days. However, after resting for a few days, Kinzu found that the problem was not here at all. In other words, although this aspect also has an impact, it is almost negligible. Now, Kinzu began to panic. Isn't this the sequel of getting the system? Don't let it die before I have enough enjoyment. Fortunately, when Kinzu was full of entanglement and even prepared to go to the hospital, the system that had disappeared for many days suddenly spoke. Host, please don't worry. Your condition is normal and will return to normal in 2 days. You are finally alive. Kinzu's face immediately showed an excited expression when he heard the voice of the system. How is it? Have you completed the upgrade? Of course, the system upgrade is complete and all functions have returned to normal. The system seemed to be very proud of its own achievements, and the voice of the system was a little different. Not only have all functions returned to normal, but this system has also added a new function. Oh? There is a new function? Kinzu was stunned for a moment, and then asked curiously. Tell me quickly, what new function has been released now? Host, please take a look. The system did not waste any words and directly created an almost transparent barrier in front of Kinzu. What is this? Kinzu looked at the transparent barrier in front of him with a confused face. This is a space channel. The system explained calmly. Space channel? Kinzu's eyes lit up, and he asked excitedly. What is on the other side of this channel? What? Of course it's a new world. Although the system's answer was calm, Kinzu could still hear a hint of pride in his words. It seems that being able to create such a space channel is also a very powerful thing for the system. In fact, what Kinzu didn't know was that when a certain unknown master designed this system, he didn't add any space channels. Therefore, the current space channel was completely made by the system itself. That system. Rubbing his hands excitedly, Kinzu asked with anticipation. Can this space channel be used? Of course it can. The system said very confidently. What's the new function if it can't be used? That's true. Touching his nose, Kinzu quickly ran into his room, took a submachine gun from the gun cabinet, and said impatiently, Well, system, let's go now. Now? The system asked uncertainly. Yes, right now. Kinzu nodded affirmatively. It's just fine, why don't you go? Hey, host, there's something you may need to know. There was a hint of embarrassment in the voice, and the system said a little embarrassedly. Because this function is still in the stage of gradual improvement, it can only be used once a day at present. What? Once a day? Kinzu was so shocked that he almost jumped up. God knows what he will encounter in that unknown world. If he encounters danger after going there, he must wait a day before coming back, then it will be a disaster. Besides, even if he didn't encounter any danger, it's not easy to explain that he disappeared here for a day. For now, that's it. The system said with some helplessness. This problem has troubled him for a long time, but he has never found a way to solve it. The main reason is that the materials for constructing the space tunnel are not easy to find. If Kinzu hadn't found a semi-finished product in the Appalachian Mountains last time, he wouldn't be able to build this space tunnel. How about it? Host, are you still going? Well, let me think about it. Touching his nose, Kinzu wanted to go to the mysterious world opposite and take a look, but for the sake of his own life, he gave up the idea. Forget it, let me make some adequate preparations first. After dismissing the system, Kinzu put the submachine gun back into the gun cabinet and walked downstairs with some resentment. He had to think of a way to have the best of both worlds, which could ensure his own safety and prevent people around him from finding out that he had disappeared for a day. However, after thinking about it, let alone how to ensure his own safety, Kinzu didn't even think of how to disappear quietly for a day. Forget it, don't think about it for now, let's take it one step at a time. Shaking his head and throwing these messy thoughts behind him, Kinzu patted his butt, walked outside the villa, and watched the women at home playing with the little ones. It's true that the Alaskan pigs are not worthy at their names. In just less than 2 months, these little guys have grown from tiny to small balls of meat. Shaoru, you are letting them go. Seeing his sister still feeding the little guys, Kinzu couldn't help but walk over and asked with a smile. How is it? How much have you learned in English during this period? Can you have a simple conversation? Simple conversation? Brother, you look down on me too much, don't you? Kinru pouted her lips, stood up, and said proudly. Not only can I have some simple conversations now, I can even understand some local slang. Oh? So fast? Touching his chin, looking at the proud Kinru, Kinzu pondered in his heart. It seems that it's time to let this little girl go to school. Otherwise, staying at home and being a light bulb every day is not a good thing. Chapter 1031. Encounter in a small town. Kinzu thought so and did so. The next morning, just after breakfast, he drove out with Dale and Erica. Sister-in-law, why is my brother out again? Kinru, who didn't know what fate she was about to face, watched her brother's car disappear in front of her eyes, and complained to Zumengyo with some dissatisfaction. He won't be gone for another week, will he? Really, he doesn't even know to spend more time with his sister-in-law at home. Oh? So Shiara wants your brother to spend more time with his sister-in-law. Zumengyo looked at Kinru with a smile. Isn't he going to accompany a little girl? Of course I have to. Puffing up her cheeks, Kinru said seriously, you must accompany your sister-in-law first. After accompanying your sister-in-law, you will naturally come to accompany me. Hehe, okay, I'll tell him when you come back that you are not allowed to go out next time. Yeah, that's how it should be. Running around outside every day is too outrageous. Looking at the indignant sister-in-law beside her, Zumengyo couldn't help but curl up her lips. She really wanted to know if this girl would be so excited if she knew that her brother was going to help her find a school. Night the 15th galloped all the way, and it took more than half an hour to arrive at a nearby town. Boss, are you sure you want Xiaoru to go to school here? After getting off the car, Dale looked around and frowned. Let's not talk about whether there is a school in this town. Even if there is, it is probably a rural primary school. But what is Kinru's identity? She is the sister of a billionaire. Is it necessary to let a billionaire's sister go to school in such a place? This is definitely not possible. Hearing Dale's words, Kinzu shook his head subconsciously. What a joke. How could Kinzu like a place that even Dale, a real American, couldn't stand? Apart from anything else, just looking at the sparse flow of people in the town, you can tell that there are not many people in total. And how can a small town with not many people have a good school? It was not until this time that Kinzu realized how stupid he was. If you think about it, you can understand that Montana is originally an agricultural and animal husbandry continent. Although there are several good universities, they are all concentrated in some big cities. What about his ranch? Although the area is large enough, it is too far away from those big cities. If Kinru is sent to those big cities in Montana, such as Billings, to go to school, then she can only live by herself. Because there is no one to take care of her. Just because she goes to school, should he buy a house and send someone to take care of her daily life? This method is okay, but it is a bit extravagant and wasteful. Therefore, from the beginning, he should not let Kinru come with him. If Kinru is still in New York or Boston, he can find someone to help take care of her daily life. Forget it, go back and discuss it carefully. Frowning and thinking for a while, Kinzu decided to go back first. There is no way, who made him not think it through at the beginning. In his subconscious, he still thinks that this is similar to the previous Boston. Any small town around is a small city with complete facilities. How can it be like now? Not to mention a small city, it can only be compared with a small village in the countryside of China. Hey, isn't this our big rancher? How come you have time to hang out in town? Kinzu, who was about to get in the car to go back to the ranch, suddenly heard a somewhat nonchalant voice in his ears. Well, who are you? Turning around, Kinzu looked at the cowboys who were surrounding him, wearing holy clothes, white-brimmed hats, and with a hint of hatred in their eyes, and his heart paused. Sure enough, what was coming finally came. Humph, of course you, the big rancher, don't know us, but we know you. Without wasting time talking to Kinzu, the leading cowboy took out a pistol from his trouser pocket and said with a fake smile, "How is it? Brothers are a little short of money recently, would you like to be generous and help out?" Chapter 1032. You slept with Sister Sayu? Donate generously? Just you. Although this guy was holding a pistol in his hand, Kinzu didn't take it seriously at all and looked at him with a sneer on his face. Mars, I don't mean to look down on you, but you want to rob me with just these few people. Ha ha, it seems that our rich man is not very smart. Or are Chinese people born so stupid? Hearing Kinzu's words, Mars almost laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. He pointed at the two women beside Kinzu and said teasingly, "You were a billionaire, but you don't even bring a bodyguard when you go out, but only bring these two girls. Who else can I rob if I don't rob you? Heh, girls." Touching his nose, Kinzu turned his head and looked at Dale and Erica behind him, and said with a smile, "That guy said that your two girls are useless. What do you think?" "What else can I think? Just kill them." Erica, who was standing next to Kinzu, shrugged casually and stepped forward. While Mars was not able to react, she kicked the gun in his hand away. At the same time, Dale was not idle either, and quickly took out his pistol from his waist. Bang! 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 After a few crisp gunshots, the cowboys who had not yet reacted to the sudden change just now fell to the ground. Ah, fuck, it hurts so much, my leg is broken. Quick, call an ambulance, my leg is broken. I want to go home, it hurts so much, I won't come out again. In an instant, the originally quiet street was filled with screams like ghosts and wolves howling. You guys, you dare to shoot. Mars, who was awakened by the screams, didn't care about picking up his gun at this time. He retreated with a look of horror. I'm going to sue you, you dare to carry a gun with you. You're done. Mars, who was still a little flustered, became more courageous as he spoke, and in the end he was even more gloating. You know, although guns are not banned in the United States, guns are prohibited from being carried in public places. Especially the pistol in Dale's hand, they are easy to hide firearms, and it is absolutely forbidden to carry them without a concealed gun license. Oh? You want to sue us? Sure. Kinzu came out from behind Erica and looked at him with a sneer on his face. Call the police quickly, I'll wait here. Mars was a little stunned when he heard it. Is this guy stupid? He dared to call the police for such a serious crime. What? You don't want to report it? Then how about I help you call the police? Kinzu took out his mobile phone and pretended to call. No, don't call the police, we'll leave now. Seeing that Kinzu really planned to call the police, Mars was scared and his voice was trembling. Don't look at his aggressive look just now, but that was just to scare Kinzu. Because he also had a gun on him, and he took out the gun first. If he called the police, although Kinzu might be put in jail, he couldn't run away. In order not to make wedding clothes for others, Mars planned to admit defeat this time and wait for his brother to come back. HMPH, you're smart. Kinzu couldn't help curling his lips when he saw this. He ignored these guys and got in the car. Even if he called the police, these little hooligans would probably just go to jail for a few days, so there was no need to bother with them. Boss, look at that guy's eyes, he doesn't look like he's just going to let it go. After getting in the car, Erica started the car and gestured at his neck. Do you want me to deal with them? Forget it. Kinzu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. This girl is getting more and more fierce now. I haven't seen her like this before. Back to the ranch, Kinzu was pestered by his younger sister Kinru as soon as he got off the car. Brother, I want to tell you something very important. Oh? What's it? Looking at the serious look of the little girl, Kinzu was also a little curious, and couldn't help but reach out and touch her little head. Did you get into trouble again? No. Kinru pouted her little mouth and stared at her brother with dissatisfaction. I have discussed with my sister-in-law that you are not allowed to run around or stay out all night in the future. Kinzu looked at the girl speechlessly. Is this the legendary strength to pit brother? Shaoru, brother also has news to tell you. Huh? What? Looking at the weird smile on Kinzu's face, Kinru suddenly had an ominous premonition in her heart. Did you sleep with Sister Sayu? Rubbing her temples with a headache, Kinzu gritted his teeth and said word by word. You were going to school. Go to school? Hearing this sudden news, Kinru was so anxious that she almost jumped up. Brother, dear brother, I haven't learned English well yet, how can I go to school? This is very simple. Kinzu shrugged his shoulders and said with a fake smile. Practice is the only criterion for testing truth. It's useless to study every day without practicing, don't you think? No, it's not. Stamping her feet, Kinru turned around and ran to the villa. She was going to complain. This bad brother, in order to avenge her, actually let her go to school, it was so abominable. When Kinzu entered the room, the little girl was snuggling in Zumengyo's arms and acting like a spoiled child. When she saw him come in, she immediately rolled her eyes at him. Big hectares, come here quickly. Kinzu ignored the girl and walked towards the two huskies sleeping like dead pigs in the corner. Get up quickly, it's time for dinner. Woof woof, woof woof woof. The two huskies, who had not reacted at first, got up instantly when they heard that it was time for dinner, and ran to the kitchen with their own food bowls in their mouths. These two idiots. Kinzu was so angry that he stood up and followed after being ignored by the two huskies. I have good news for you. Lunch, dinner, and supper all cancelled today. Woof, the two huskies, who only noticed Kinzu at this time, were a little confused. What's going on? When did he come back? After looking at each other, the two idiots shook their heads to indicate that they didn't notice. But despite this, Kinzu still cancelled their meals, and Betty beside them was no exception. As a result, when it was time to eat, these guys held their own bowls and gathered around the dining table, staring at them eagerly. Especially Betty, this guy not only held the biggest bowl, but also put his big head in front of Kinzu. The meaning was obvious: I'm hungry. Stay away. Kinzu pushed this guy's big head away in annoyance. You are now a mature brown bear, you should learn to find food by yourself. Although, blinking her big eyes, Betty looked at Kinzu in confusion. What do you mean? I don't understand, can you say it again? Chapter 1033 The surprise brought by Chen Mu. Although Kinru was a little resistant to going to school right now, she finally gave in obediently, and even felt a little overjoyed. There was no other way. Who asked Kinzu to send her to Boston to study? In Boston, she could play with Sister Sayu. How great would that be? Silly girl, I warn you, be honest when you get to Boston. After sending Kinru and Erica to the airport, Kinzu reminded her with some worry. Erica, you take good care of her for me, and you must send her back to me on time after school. Boss, don't worry. Reaching out to tidy up a strand of hair on her forehead, Erica solemnly promised. As long as I'm alive, Miss Keen will be fine. Well, I believe you. Nodding, Kinzu said nothing more, and looked at his little sister with some reluctance. He didn't feel it when he was at the ranch, but now he suddenly had to send this girl away. He really felt a little reluctant. Call me when you get there, and remember to tell Sayu hello for me. TSK, I won't. Kinru pouted, and her face changed instantly as she was still immersed in the sadness of parting. You have to take responsibility for what you did, don't expect me to tell you anything. Kinzu stared at the girl helplessly and said unhappily, what did I do? Little girl, don't think about it all day long. If you don't study hard for me in school, I will deal with you. Humph, you only know how to threaten me with this. She pouted a little depressed. Although she was a little dissatisfied with her brother's style, Kinru really didn't dare to make him angry, so she could only mutter helplessly. I know, I will definitely study hard, don't worry. Okay, it's getting late, you guys go in quickly. After subduing the little girl again, Kinzu's mood became much better, and he waved to them with a smile. I'll go see you guys next time I have time, remember to think of me. I won't miss you. After waving goodbye to Kinzu, the little girl following Erica suddenly became lively. Sister Erica, I'll take you to play in Boston when we get there, it's so fun there. Really? Erica looked at Kinru with a puzzled look and asked in a daze. I've been in Boston for so many years, how come I don't know where to have fun? After seeing Erica and Kinru off, Kinzu did not leave the airport immediately, but raised his wrist to check the time. It should be almost there, right? Before coming to the airport, Chen Mu happened to call him and said that their plane would arrive in Billings at noon today. According to the time, it should be about time now. Dear passengers, hello, Flight XXX is about to land. Just when Kinzu was getting a little impatient, a series of airport broadcasts sounded, instantly restoring his spirits. I'm here. I hope this guy won't find 2 dinosaurs for me. If this guy hadn't said that he brought 2 newly recruited accountants, Kinzu wouldn't have come all the way to pick him up. Ha, boss, long time no see. In the airport, Chen Mu, who was wearing a neat suit and a colorful tie, opened his big hands as soon as he saw Kinzu. Yes, it's been a while. Although Chen Mu was very enthusiastic, and although he hadn't seen this guy for a long time. But at this moment, Kinzu's eyes stayed on the 2 girls behind Chen Mu who hadn't seen for a long time, and he couldn't move his eyes away for a long time. Why are you here? Why? Can't we come? Hearing Kinzu's words, the girl standing on the left reached out and took off the big sunglasses on her face, and said with a smile, We're here with the company, you can ask Manager Chen for details. Manager Chen? Kinzu turned his head and looked at Chen Mu, smiling and saying, Manager Chen, don't you think you should give me an explanation? This, touching his nose uncontrollably, Chen Mu said with a wry smile. Boss, I'm doing this for the sake of the company. Aren't we short of 2 accountants? They are all graduates from prestigious universities, and their work abilities are obvious to all. So I asked them to come. So, I should thank you. Kinzu looked at this guy with a bit of a smile. I'll remember this for you first, and I'll settle the accounts with you later, just wait for me. Boss, no personal vengeance. Shrugging, Chen Mu said with some gloating. I think, boss, you should take care of your own business first, otherwise there will be a fire in the backyard if you are not careful. This is not your fault. After glaring at this guy unhappily, Kinzu said nothing more, but smiled and walked towards the two familiar figures. Let's go home first, Mengyo must be waiting anxiously. Well, okay. They nodded quietly. Even though Kinzu mentioned Mengyo, the two women didn't say anything, but followed Kinzu out very calmly. Not only that, while walking, the two women also held Kinzu's arms on the left and right, as if they were afraid that others would not notice something. Hey, are we a little ostentatious? Kinzu looked around with a guilty conscience, and after seeing that no one paid attention to him, he breathed a sigh of relief. What are you afraid of? There are no acquaintances. He waved his hand nonchalantly, and the two women not only had no intention of letting go, but hugged closer and closer. You bastard, how long have you not visited us? Don't you miss us sisters at all? How could it be? Kinzu smiled awkwardly and defended himself weakly. Aren't you busy recently? I was still saying that after this busy period, I will go to Boston to see you. Really? The woman seemed a little unconvinced. Of course, it's realer than real gold. Kinzu nodded affirmatively. Regardless of whether it was true or not, he could not back down at this time, otherwise he would be confessing himself. Okay, then I'll believe you once. After laughing twice with satisfaction, the woman said with some resentment, Christine goes there more often than you do. If you don't come to see us, we will run away with her. What? That woman still has time to come to see you. Kinzu stopped in surprise. He never thought that when he didn't think about it, Christine would dare to take advantage of the situation. This is simply unreasonable, and she doesn't take herself seriously at all, right? What? Are you jealous? Facing Kinzu's questioning, the woman not only did not answer, but giggled. That laughter was so clear even in this bustling airport. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 1034a. Newly opened restaurant. Facing Mobika's cunning smile, Kinzu could only shake his head helplessly. Okay, let's talk about it when we get back. People are watching. Indeed, even in Europe and the United States, it is rare for two women to hold the arm of a man at the same time. What's more, these guys behaved very intimately. In addition to the airport, he took a few people to the night the 15th. After Dale started the car, he smiled and asked, On it, I remember that you seem to be studying biology, and you are still researching some topics. How did you think of working? Yes, I studied biology. Nodding, Onit blushed and said, but I took accounting as an elective, so it's not considered a cross-industry. Ah, okay. Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly. Speaking of which, he didn't even know what his woman was studying, which was a bit too perfunctory. Then why did your professor agree to let you come out? Because the laboratory was disbanded. The laboratory was disbanded. Kinzu was stunned. Yes, it has been disbanded. Her face darkened, and Onit explained with some sadness. The research failed. There has been no results for more than a year. The school couldn't stand it anymore, so they disbanded the laboratory. This, Kinzu didn't know what to say anymore, so he simply looked at Mobika for help, signaling the girl to come over to save the situation. Hehe, isn't this just right? Kinzu was not disappointed. Just when he didn't know what to say, Mobika came over with a sweet smile. It's so annoying to stay in the laboratory all day. It's not like now. I can go shopping when I have nothing to do. It's so comfortable. That's true. Nodding, Onit's face looked better, and she said with some regret, It's just a pity for our old professor. Although the laboratory has been disbanded, he hasn't given up yet. Now he is relying on his meager savings every day to persist. Is he sure he can research it? Kinzu was a little curious. The school doesn't invest anymore, what are you, a professor, insisting on? Besides, even if you figure it out, the thing belongs to the school. I don't know why either. Shaking her head, Onit said with some emotion. But this old professor is very persistent. I believe he will succeed one day. But he has to live until that day. What do you mean? It's very simple. Kinzu shrugged. The old professor is over 70 years old this year, right? If there is no accident, he will live to 80 or 90 years old at most. Even if he is still alive by then, will he still have the energy to do this? Onid rolled her eyes and ignored Kinzu, but turned her head to the side. After not seeing him for a while, this guy has become more and more hateful. It seems that I have caused trouble again. Facing the back of Onid's head, Kinzu was a little dazed. He didn't say anything. Hey, Clean, don't you know that Onid's biggest idol is this old professor? Seeing Kinzu's bewildered look, Mobuka couldn't help but whisper in his ear, explaining. When the laboratory was disbanded, this girl took out all her savings to sponsor the old professor, but he didn't want a penny. There's such a thing. Kinzu looked at Onid in front of him in surprise. Unexpectedly, this girl would actually worship an old man with a weird temper. Of course, don't you know how famous the old professor is? Mobuka gestured exaggeratedly. He's a life scientist who once won the Nobel Prize and is a famous figure in the entire American scientific community. So, he's awesome. Kinzu nodded thoughtfully. Not only awesome, but also very awesome. Mobuka nodded his head with certainty. So what is he studying now? Should we go and sponsor him for a while? Kinzu rubbed his hands excitedly. Since this old professor is so powerful, and now he is short of money, if I don't invest some money, I will be sorry for him. I don't know. Shaking his head decisively, Mobuka pouted at Onid in front of him. You should ask her this question. I'm not the professor's student. Onid. Kinzu looked at the big foreign horse in front of him who was obviously still sulking, and shook his head helplessly. Forget it, ask again when I have time. After more than an hour of galloping, Night the 15th finally returned to the ranch before lunch. Clean, is this your ranch? I heard it's bigger than the previous one. After getting off the car, looking at the vast plains that seemed a little empty around him, Mobuka asked excitedly. Well, it's a little bigger, but it feels about the same. Kinzu, who was following behind him, had a strange look on his face at the moment. At this time, he remembered that he hadn't had time to tell Zumengyo that the two girls were coming. Although the three of them had known each other for a long time, it seemed a bit inappropriate to bring two women home rashly. Well, Chen Mu, who was following behind the others, had been ignored by him. Mobuka, you are finally here. The food is ready. Come over quickly. To Kinzu's surprise, when the group arrived in front of the villa, Zumengyo was already waiting at the door, and she greeted the two women enthusiastically. What's going on? Kinzu stared at the three people playing together in amazement. He couldn't believe his eyes. When did they have such a good time? Not to mention Kinzu, even Chen Mu behind him had a dull look on his face at this time. Boss, how did you do it? Teach me. Chen Mu came back to his senses, grabbed Kinzu's sleeve with admiration on his face, and asked embarrassedly, why do the two women in my family fight whenever they meet? Two? Looking at Chen Mu with a weird expression, Kinzu asked in surprise, when did this happen to you? How come you didn't hear any news? That, scratching his head awkwardly, Chen Mu said guiltily, not long ago, just a month or so ago. Does your sister-in-law know? Kinzu asked. Well, I see. Chen Mu said in distress. I haven't been home for almost a month. Covering his head speechlessly, Kinzu patted the guy's shoulder with sympathy, and walked into the house, saying, I can only say that I deeply sympathize. Alas, boss, you haven't told me how you did it. After following Kinzu into the villa, Chen Mu wanted to say something, but it was difficult to speak, and finally he could only sigh helplessly. Although Kinzu saw this, he said nothing. Nonsense, he himself is still a mess now, what is there to say? After a simple lunch, several women gathered together to discuss something. Seeing this, Kinzu called Chen Mu to the living room. Tell me, what are you doing here this time? You are not planning to travel on public funds, right? Boss, we seem to be in trouble. Without being polite to Kinzu, Chen Mu directly took out a document from the folder. A new restaurant has opened on the back street of Boston. Its business is similar to ours and it's very popular. A new restaurant? Kinzu frowned. What does the popular business have to do with us? Boston is so big, do you still want to monopolize it? But the taste of their dishes is similar to ours. What thanks to the book Friends for the 999 book coins reward, Leon is ashamed. Chapter 1035 What went wrong? Ranch Villa, on the sofa in the living room. Kinzu's brows have not relaxed since Chen Mu finished speaking. Are you sure that their dishes taste the same as ours? Kinzu couldn't help but be surprised. The reason why his restaurant is so popular is the taste of the dishes. Moreover, Qinzu knows it very well. The reason why the taste of those dishes is so popular is that the chef's skills are good, but the most important reason is that he provides those ingredients that can be said to be unique on this earth. But now Chen Mu actually told him that the taste of the restaurant is similar to theirs. How is this possible? Boss, I can be sure. Nodding vigorously, Chen Mu said seriously, I didn't believe it at first. For this, I even disguised myself and went to that restaurant to have a meal in person. The taste can be said to be not much different. The only difference may be that the chef's grasp of the heat is not deep enough. Brother Chen, what do you think about this? Qinzu squinted his eyes, and his expression on his face was very flat, and it was hard to tell whether he was happy or angry. I think there must be a problem inside us. Although he didn't want to admit it, under Qinzu's expressionless gaze, Chen Mu could only bite the bullet and say, I have investigated, the restaurant is fine, there is no problem, the main problem should be caused during transportation. Are you sure there is no problem inside the restaurant? Boss, I can be sure of this. Chen Mu patted his chest and guaranteed, even if there is a problem inside the restaurant, they can't transport so many ingredients without anyone noticing. The restaurants are all in the downtown area. If there is any movement, it is impossible for no one to find out. That's true. After hearing that there was no problem inside the restaurant, Qinzu's brows finally relaxed a little. As long as it is not a problem inside the restaurant, it is a small problem. Who is responsible for the transportation of ingredients? Have you checked it? I checked it, but the time is too short and I haven't found any problems yet. Chen Mu spread his hands helplessly. The transportation of ingredients was originally the responsibility of our own restaurant, but later, as there were more branches, we handed this job over to a transportation company in Revere under the help of Mayor Wesley. Since you are sure that there is no problem inside the restaurant, the only problem that may be a problem is the transportation. Qinzu thought about it and suggested, well, don't make it public when you go back, just do what you need to do, and I will arrange someone to follow them. Okay, in that case, I'm relieved. Hearing Qinzu say this, Chen Mu couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. What is he doing here? Isn't it just to ask Qinzu for help? Checking the internal affairs of his own restaurant is just to check the surveillance, and basically anyone can do this kind of work. But if he goes to investigate outside, he will be a little overwhelmed. After all, the people under Chen Mu are either waiters or chefs. How can such people follow others? Not to mention following, I guess they will be left far behind as soon as they go out. Since the goal has been achieved, Chen Mu did not stay at the ranch for long. The next morning, escorted by 2 female bodyguards, they headed to Billings Airport. Boss, why don't you let me go with him? Looking at Chen Mu's receding back, Dale looked at Qinzu with some confusion. She originally wanted to go back to Boston with Chen Mu, so that she would have more time to investigate. However, Qinzu didn't know what he was thinking, and he insisted that she wait a little longer. Is this guy not in a hurry at all? Why are you in a hurry? It's okay to go in the afternoon. Qinzu waved his hand with some disapproval. Maybe Chen Mu is being monitored now. What if you go back with him and someone sees you? Although Dale felt that the probability of this happening was 99.9%, since Qinzu said so, she could only shrug helplessly. Okay, go get ready first. This mission may not be easy. Turning and walking into the villa, Qinzu smiled and said, although there is no danger, it is still very time-consuming. You have to be mentally prepared. Boss, don't worry. After smiling indifferently, Dale followed in. What she didn't say was that this kind of mission was simply not on the same level as her previous missions in the army. After sending Chen Mu and Dale away, Qinzu said something to Zhu Mengyu again, and then returned to the bedroom alone. As early as last night, Qinzu had summoned Cheese. It should have returned to the fishing ground by now, right? The perspective switched, and when Qinzu opened his eyes again, he had appeared on the bottom of the sea. Where is this? Shaking his big head, Qinzu dodged and quickly rushed to the sea surface. Fortunately, although it is still a little distance from the shore, it is indeed within the scope of the fishing ground. After confirming his position, Qinzu did not hesitate, returned to the bottom of the sea again, and began to wander in the fishing ground. He didn't have any special plans this time. He just wanted to see how much fish the fishery had caught after fishing for a while. You don't know until you see it. It's shocking. After just swimming around the coral reefs twice, Qinzu discovered a horrifying fact. There are no fish. Yes, in that huge coral reef, Qinzu actually found dozens of small fish still swimming. Where are all the fish? After a moment of daze, Kinzu quickly turned around and continued to walk around the fishery. Fortunately, the situation was not as bad as Kinzu imagined. Just after passing the coral reef, he found a small school of sardines, and there were quite a few of them, as many as tens of thousands. Really, I'm scared to death. Kinzu pouted and ignored the small school of fish, but continued to walk around the fishery. He wanted to see if there were any good things in his fishery. Of course, the most important point is that Kinzu has to supervise the group of men in his fishery. Although Chenmu said that there should be a problem with transportation, Kinzu didn't think so. There may be problems with transportation, but the source of the ingredients, his own ranch and fishery, must not be very clean. Otherwise, after such a long time, nothing has been found wrong. Kinzu didn't believe it, so he decided to come and see for himself. With Dale monitoring the transportation and himself monitoring them, Kinzu believed that the truth would soon come to light. Moreover, although he is now at the bottom of the sea and seems to be unable to control anything, his spiritual sense has been monitoring the dog. As long as his group of fishermen go out to sea to fish, Kinzu can find them and quickly approach them. I hope he won't let me down. Kinzu sighed in his heart after looking at the direction of the dog. He really doesn't want these people in his fishery to have problems. After all, these guys have been with him when he first came to the United States, and Kinzu really hopes that their relationship can start and end well. Chapter 1036 Chenmu is being followed. I have to admit that Kinzu's guess was quite accurate. The moment Chenmu came out of the airport, he noticed that there were several people nearby who were looking at him vaguely. What on earth do these bastards want to do? After getting on the car that came to pick him up, Chenmu immediately took out his cell phone and called Kinzu directly. Boss, the situation is not good now. Oh? Is there really someone following you? After withdrawing his thoughts from the cheese, Kinzu sat on the sofa with a serious expression. It seems that their target this time is not small. Yeah, I didn't expect them to know my whereabouts so accurately. Looking at the driver in the front row who was concentrating on driving, Chenmu asked with some concern. Boss, what do you think they want to do? If they are just paying attention to the ingredients, there is no need to monitor me like this, right? You have to ask them about this question. Kinzu shrugged helplessly. If I knew what they wanted to do, I wouldn't have asked you to take risks. Okay. Chenmu sighed with some disappointment and asked, Boss, what should I do next? Do I need to change your transportation company? No, don't change it yet. Kinzu shook his head. Brother Chen, you don't have to do anything. Just pay attention to your own safety. I have already arranged it. Just wait for them to act. Chenmu was a little reluctant. Will this be too passive? There is nothing we can do about it. Kinzu was a little helpless. The enemy is hiding in the dark. We can only wait for them to come out before we can act. Okay, then I won't go anywhere these days. I'll just stay in the restaurant. After hanging up the phone, Chenmu looked at the busy traffic outside the window with a dazed look. Did he trust some people too much? This incident must have happened for more than 1 or 2 days, but he didn't even hear any news. I have to say that this is a kind of sadness. Since it is confirmed that someone is monitoring Chenmu, Kinzu will change his plan. At the very least, the bodyguards around him could no longer be sent over. After all, these women were too conspicuous. Anyone with a little bit of heart could recognize them. This is a big difficult. With his hands crossed on his legs, Kinzu sat back against the soft leather sofa and muttered to himself, Do I still need mercenaries? After thinking for a long time, Kinzu had to admit that it seemed that this was the only way now. Apart from those female bodyguards, as well as the strange beasts such as Cheese and White Tiger, Kinzu really couldn't find anyone to use. What's wrong? Are you looking for mercenaries again? Zumengyo became anxious when she accidentally heard Kinzu's mumbling to himself, and couldn't wait to ask, Is there any danger again? Honey, you have to pay attention to your safety. Don't worry, with Dale and the others here, who can hurt me? He smiled and comforted Zumengyo, until she was relieved. Kinzu picked up the phone and called Jennifer. What? You need mercenaries again? Jennifer, who received Kinzu's call, exclaimed subconsciously, and her expression was a little nervous. Boss, are you okay? Hearing Jennifer's concerned voice coming from the other end of the microphone, Kinzu couldn't help but touch his nose. Is he so popular? Why do they all care about him so much recently? There is no need to talk about Dale and Zumengyo, everyone knows what kind of relationship they have, but why is Jennifer like this now? Well, Jennifer. Touching his nose, Kinzu smiled and said, "You should give me the phone number from last time, I need it urgently." "Oh, okay, I'll give you the number right away." Jennifer's delicate little face seemed to have come back to her senses, and she couldn't help but blushing, and then smiled. "Boss, you have to pay attention to safety, after all, there is still so much money in the account that has not been spent." Kinzu. Chapter 1037. What we saw on the fishery ground. Although he felt a little speechless about Jennifer's words, Kinzu still had to thank her for her blessing. After all, it was at least a concern, right? After getting the phone, Kinzu didn't hesitate and called directly. Perhaps because of the relationship between the old customers, after learning about the situation, the account manager of Blackwater who was responsible for receiving him asked Kinzu very considerately if he wanted to hire another team to protect his safety. Kinzu, who had not had this idea at first, was immediately tempted when he heard it. A mercenary team only has 5 mercenaries, and they are performing this kind of long-term security work that is not dangerous. The maximum monthly salary is only $100,000 or $200,000, which can be said to be a drizzle for him now. But the role they can play is definitely not something that can be bought back with $100,000 or $200,000. The ranch is really too big. It's good enough for Dale and the other female bodyguards to be able to protect the villa. The periphery of the ranch can basically be said to be open. Originally, he wanted to build a fence around the ranch like in Boston, but after riding a horse for a day, Kinzu decisively gave up this idea. Just like what I said before, the ranch is too big. If you want to build a fence around a ranch of 100,000 acres, the cost is simply terrifying. So, when Kinzu heard the account manager's suggestion, he hesitated for only 2 seconds and waved his hand. "How about this, send me 2 more teams, the long-term ones." "I'm afraid 1 is not enough." After a long pause, the account manager asked uncertainly, "Mr. Clean, are you sure you want 2 more mercenary teams?" "Of course, I'm sure." Okay, Mr. Clean, I'll arrange it for you right away." After putting down the phone, Kinzu slapped himself hard, feeling the pain on his face. After making sure that he was not dreaming, this guy jumped up excitedly. He really didn't expect that he just gave a casual reminder, but he actually got 2 more orders, and they were long-term ones. Kinzu didn't know that his sudden idea made a young man who had just entered the industry get the first big order in his life. At this moment, after hanging up the phone, he switched his consciousness back to cheese. Because it was early morning, the fishing boat should have gone out to sea. Sure enough, Kinzu just switched his thoughts back and heard the sound of the fishing boat engine. Without hesitation, Kinzu shook his thick tail and jumped towards the sea. When he reached the sea, Kinzu did not rush to show his head, but first observed the outside world through the sea. Fortunately, the sea was calm at the moment, and the fishing boat was still a little distance away from his location. After making sure that he would not be exposed, Kinzu made his body smaller until he became a small snake more than 2 meters long, and then he stopped his actions. Well, this is good, it does not affect the speed, and it is not easy to be discovered. It is perfect for tracking people. Looking at his current body that is less than 2 meters long, Kinzu's mouth cracked and revealed a smug smile. It must be said that snakes swim very fast. Especially a snake like Kinzu who has opened a plug-in. After more than 10 minutes of chasing, the fishing boat that had been sailing at high speed in front was finally caught up by Kinzu. Well, although they stopped only when they reached the destination, Kinzu quietly climbed onto the fishing boat along the side of the boat and hid his figure in a pile of debris. He wanted to see if these hired fishermen could stick to their bottom line. "Hey, Will, are you sure you want to cast the net in this area?" Looking up and casually looking at the surrounding environment, Simon's big head felt a little dizzy. "What's going on? Didn't we just find nothing nearby yesterday? Why are we still here today? Why not?" Standing at the bow, after taking a deep puff of cigarette, Will slowly blew out the eye sockets and drew a circle in the air. "Simon, don't you think that there are fewer and fewer fish in our fishery?" "I do feel that way." Nodding, Simon was a little confused and asked doubtfully, "But, does this have anything to do with us casting nets here?" "You, just a stupid." Shaking his head helplessly, Will put out the cigarette and threw it into the trash can, explaining, "It's because we catch too many fish every time. The fishery is now a little overfished, so we need to give them some buffer time. But if we can't catch any fish, how do we explain to the restaurant?" Scratching his hair, Simon leaned against the side of the boat, looking a little hesitant. "After all, this is what the boss has instructed us to do. The restaurant wants more and more fish. If we can't keep up with the supply, Will the boss be angry? Of course he will be angry, but what can we do? Shrugging his shoulders, Will said with a melancholy look on his face. After all, the fishery is the key. If the restaurant is out of ingredients, we can sell more other things. But if the fishery dies, then we will have nothing. I believe the boss can understand us. That's true. After nodding in agreement, Simon asked curiously, Will, do you think our restaurant business is so good? Why are there more and more requests for good? Who knows? Will smiled, turned and walked towards the cab, saying as he walked, Okay, let's get ready to go to the internet cafe. We still have to pretend. It's better to not catch any fish than to not go out to sea. It would be bad if the boss thinks we are lazy. Okay, get ready to cast the net. With a shout, a group of fishing nets were ejected and scattered in the air, just like Kinzu's moved, swaying and falling into the sea. Indeed, Kinzu's heart was relieved at this moment. Although Will and Simon only cared about fishing and didn't consider other things, which made Kinzu a little annoyed, but generally speaking, these two guys could still be trusted. At least, in order not to destroy this fishing ground, they have done what they can. It seems that the problem is really in the restaurant. Kinzu jumped off the boat and swam while thinking about how to check it in his mind. Ask directly. That's definitely not possible. Once the snake is alerted, it will be difficult to find their handle. But if he doesn't ask, he really doesn't know how to check. Because Kinzu is still not clear at which link of the restaurant has gone wrong. Forget it, let's take a look at the problem of the fishery first. After struggling for a moment, Kinzu stopped thinking about this problem and prepared to see what went wrong with his own fishery. When he first arrived, he found that the catch in his fishery seemed to be a little less. At first, he didn't take it seriously, thinking it was because of overfishing. But after thinking about it carefully, he felt something was wrong. His is not an ordinary fishery. With the bonus of system attributes, let alone overfishing, even if you poison them all with drugs, new fish will soon join in. So, it is normal to have no fish for a day or two. If it is like this for a period of time, then you have to find the reason. Hey, what is that? And there is a bloody smell. After circling the seabed for a few times, Kinzu suddenly found a few faint smells of blood in his perception system. Without hesitation, relying on his small size, he was not so easy to be discovered and would not be targeted, so Kinzu swam directly over along the seabed. Fuck, Kinzu, who had just swam for a few minutes and arrived at the scene, looked at the group of big guys in front of him, and immediately cursed in his heart. Damn, with these guys here, no matter how many fish there are in the fishery, it is not enough to cause trouble. It turned out that, according to Kinzu's perception, a group of killer whales in front were feasting on a group of tuna. You bastards, get out of my way. Without thinking too much, Kinzu, whose body was about to grow bigger, shook his big tail and rushed over directly. When he got close, without any nonsense, before they could react, Kinzu's tail had already hit the lower abdomen of a killer whale firmly. With a dull sound, the killer whale's huge body drew a graceful arc on the seabed and fell heavily. The remaining 7 or 8 killer whales finally reacted at this time, and one by one, they rushed towards him with their teeth bared as if they were crazy. However, although Kinzu's body was big, it was not bulky at all. He just twisted it twice and perfectly avoided their impact. As everyone knows, the larger the animal, the more difficult it is to turn around. Especially on the seabed, and there is still not enough space on the seabed. If they are not careful, they will hit themselves. So, while the group of killer whales were preparing to turn around, Kinzu quickly turned his body and rushed over. Bang! Another dull sound rang out, and Kinzu's tail was like a steel whip, hitting the killer whales firmly. Not to mention, killer whales are really thick-skinned. Even though they were hit by Kinzu, they were not seriously injured. At most, they were a little dizzy from the impact. So, when Kinzu was about to repeat the same trick for the 3rd time, he was surprised to find that the first killer whale that he had whipped away swam back again. Except for the crooked swimming posture, this guy didn't even have a wound on his body. Damn, they are really thick-skinned. Kinzu pouted and looked at the group of killer whales in front of him. For a while, he was actually in a stalemate with them. In fact, it's not that he can't kill these guys. He only needs to use the power of magic, and Kinzu can stab these guys into dice in a minute. But wouldn't it be a pity if such a big killer whale was killed like this? Chapter 1038 Bustling Fishing Ground. After more than half an hour of maneuvering, Kin Feng finally knocked down the group of guys. Although they were not killed, they were basically half crippled. These bastards, if I don't beat them up, I really don't know whose territory this is. Lying on a huge rock on the seabed, Qinzu began to summon Yingguang while resting. Didn't I ask this guy to watch the fishing grounds? Why hasn't he come for so long? However, after waiting for more than half an hour, Yingguang didn't move. Now, Qin Feng was a little panicked. Will nothing happen? After this thought flashed through his mind, Qin Feng didn't care about the group of killer whales still panting around him, and rushed to the shore with a flick of his tail. In his perception, Yingguang was nearby. Qinzu had just left, and the killer whales that were still lying on the seabed and wailing stopped instantly. With their eyes wide open, they looked around and confirmed that Qinzu was not there. These guys instantly became alert and didn't even care about their companions. They swam towards the deep sea. This guy is too scary. It's better to run away quickly. Qinzu, who was swimming towards the shore, would never have thought that there were a few killer whales pretending to be dead. However, none of this mattered. Now Qinzu has put all his thoughts on Yingguang. Logically speaking, this guy should have come as soon as he received his order. But this time, it didn't move at all. Could it be that the pet contract can get out of control? Thinking of this terrible consequence, Qin Feng's body, which was swimming, couldn't help shaking. It's not a big deal if one Yingguang loses control, but if Cheese or White Tiger also loses control, then things will be a big deal. In the anxiety along the way, Qinzu followed the feeling in his heart and finally found Yingguang near a rocky beach. Fortunately, the situation was not as bad as Qinzu thought, but it was also beyond his expectations. What's going on? How did this guy become like this? Swimming closer, Qinzu poked the silver light lying on the ground with his tail, wanting to see if it was dead or not. Qinzu couldn't blame him for thinking too much, because the guy looked a little scary now. The originally streamlined body had become tattered at this time, with at least hundreds of wounds of all sizes. Some of these wounds may have been soaked in water for a long time, and now they look a little festering. Squeak, squeak, as if sensing Qinzu's breath, the dying silver light barely raised its head and uttered a few wailing sounds. It's good that you're not dead, it's good that you're not dead. Seeing this, Qinzu breathed a sigh of relief and quickly opened the system to exchange for a drop of spiritual liquid. Fortunately, I can open the system now, otherwise you would be completely dead. After dropping a drop of spiritual liquid, the body of the silver light gradually changed, and the wounds gradually began to heal. Even the wounds that were severely festering began to scab and peel off, recovering little by little. It seems that one drop is not enough. Qinzu muttered to himself, and he did not feel sorry for his spiritual energy liquid. He immediately exchanged another drop. After 2 drops of spiritual energy liquid, the effect can be said to be immediate. The wounds that were originally just scabs quickly began to grow new skin, and even the body that seemed to be torn open by some animal was growing rapidly. Okay, it's okay now. Seeing that Yingguang had regained consciousness, Qinzu's expression became relaxed. Come on, little guy, tell the master quickly, what guy made you like this? Squeak, squeak, sensing Qinzu's doubts, Yingguang, who had just recovered his health, immediately began to complain to him. It turned out that not long after Qinzu left, a lot of big guys poured into the fishing ground. The group of killer whales he just encountered were just relatively weak among them. Even great white sharks, Yingguang encountered several times, and they were all in groups. Damn, what's going on? Even great white sharks are in groups. Qinzu waved his tail a few times in annoyance, cursing in his heart at this moment. Aren't these damn guys in the deep sea area? Why did they think of wandering in the shallow sea? And they just stopped in his own fishing ground. With such a group of natural predators in the fishing ground, how could there be any fish surviving? No, I have to go and see what's going on. After finding a remote place, Qinzu settled Yingguang and turned around to swim towards the fishing ground. This time, he did not hang around in the shallow sea area, but went directly to the deeper water area in the fishing ground. Qinzu knew that although these guys came to the shallow sea area, they were still deep sea creatures after all, and they must prefer to move in deeper water areas. Sure enough, not long after Qinzu arrived in the deep sea area, he saw a group of great white sharks shaking their tails and swimming slowly and leisurely among the corals. Hiss, wow, they are really in groups. Qinzu stopped far away and looked at the shark fins of the group of 6 great white sharks in front of him. He couldn't help but feel a pain in his balls. What the hell is going on? These guys definitely wouldn't come here for no reason. Great white sharks, which always act alone, would not suddenly become social animals. However, no one can answer Qinzu's doubts yet. After observing quietly for a while from a distance, Qin quietly bypassed the group of great white sharks after seeing that they didn't move. He wanted to see what big guys had come to his fishing ground. There is a saying that you don't know until you see it, and you'll be shocked when you see it. After swimming around the deep sea, Qin was completely numb. There were no less than 10 species of sharks that he had seen, and the total number had exceeded 100, reaching an astonishing 120. As for other large fish such as whales, the total number was more than double that of sharks. Millimeter, are these guys here for a meeting? Qin knew without even thinking that something must have gone wrong with his fishery, otherwise there wouldn't be such a weird phenomenon. With so many predators in his fishery, let alone raising fish, the fisherman should be thankful that nothing happened. After withdrawing his thoughts from the cheese, Qin didn't hesitate and took out his phone to call Will. "Boss, are you looking for me?" Soon, Will's somewhat nervous voice rang out on the other end of the phone. He thought Qin knew something and was going to come to him to question him, and his face turned pale. Don't look at how confident he was in front of Simon, that was just to reassure him. If Qin really settled the score, Will didn't think he could accept it. However, Qin obviously didn't mean to cause trouble for him now. "Will, listen carefully, take your people back now, and don't go out to sea within this month." Boss, no going out to sea this month." Will was a little stunned. "Yes, you don't have to go out to sea this month. I have some troubles that I need to solve first." "Okay, I understand." Although he was a little confused, since Qin said so, Will could only do it decisively. Chapter 1039 Big Mistake. Qin just hung up Will's phone call, and Chenmu called him right after. On the phone, the guy asked in a rather flattered manner, "Boss, why did you hire so many bodyguards? It's a bit wasteful." Not many, your safety is still more important." Qin was a little surprised by Chenmu's call. Didn't he tell him about this before? Why was he still so surprised? Besides, it was just a team of bodyguards, although not a lot, it was not a lot. Isn't this a lot? Chenmu looked at the dozen bodyguards in front of him, and his mouth twitched a little. Is this how all the rich play? After thinking about it, Chenmu changed to a more tactful way and said, "Boss, I really don't need so many bodyguards. Just give me a few. It's too eye-catching to go out with a dozen bodyguards every day." A dozen? Now it was Qin's turn to be dumbfounded. What's going on? Where did he get a dozen bodyguards? Didn't I just hire 5 for him? Wait a minute, Brother Chen, something is wrong here. Let's sort it out first. Rubbing his head, Qin asked with a wry smile, "You said just now that you have a dozen bodyguards." "Yes, 15, and they are all big and burly men." Glancing at the group of strong men standing in the office, Chenmu said a little depressed, "Boss, you don't know, with so many people coming to this station, I am safe, but the restaurant has become panic-stricken." "No, Brother Chen, I only found 5 bodyguards for you." Qin touched his nose, took out the list that Carla sent to him from the side, and said, "Your bodyguard captain should be called Winkle, ask if there is one." Winkle. Chenmu looked up at the crowd, and when he saw one of the guys coming out, he nodded quickly. "Boss, there is this person." "That's right," Qin said with a smile. "He and his 4 men are responsible for protecting you, and the other 10 are bodyguards I prepared for the ranch." "Is that so?" After a long sigh, Chenmu said with a smile, "Boss, you almost scared me to death. You made such a big fuss, I thought we were going to be wiped out." "How is that possible?" Qin said with a sneer. "Just relying on those despicable guys, they want to fight us. If I didn't have other arrangements, I could deal with them in minutes." "In that case, then I'm relieved," Chenmu said with a smile. "Boss, should I let the remaining bodyguards come directly to you?" "Well, let them come." Qin nodded, then warned with some concern. "Try to be quick and don't make any more mistakes. Things have been a bit uneasy here these 2 days." After hanging up the phone, Chenmu glanced at Winkle standing in front of him, smiled and nodded at him. "Mr. Winkle, I'll trouble you and your team to be responsible for my safety from now on." "Got it, boss." Without any extra nonsense, Winkle saluted decisively and turned back to his position. "Mr. Cummings, Mr. Gill." Turning his head to look at the captains of the other 2 teams, Chenmu said with some confusion, "Your 2 teams should be going to Montana to protect the big boss, why are you here?" "What?" The 2 big men named by Chenmu looked at each other and then shook their heads. "Well, I'm sorry, no one has told us about this. You should ask your superiors first." Chenmu shook his head. For the first time, he felt that Blackwater was not so reliable. The big boss hopes that you will rush over as soon as possible after confirmation. He is in trouble now. Okay, don't worry, we will rush over as soon as possible. Nodding, the two no longer hesitated and immediately contacted their leaders. It turned out that they did go to the wrong place. The reason for this mistake was that the secretary failed to understand Carlos's order and attributed the employer of the 15 people to Chen Mu. This damn woman, I hope she won't delay our mission. Sitting on the plane urgently dispatched by the company, Cummins shook his head helplessly, speechless about this mistake. I hope so, otherwise, even if we killed her, we can't recover our losses. Leader Jill's face was not very good either. He had just taken office and made such a big mistake. He didn't believe that the employer had no opinion on them. Fortunately, Blackwater was efficient. They found the mistake in the morning and appeared in Montana in the afternoon. Well, the weather is still good. I hope the big boss is in a good mood too. Shrugging his shoulders, Cummins became a little uneasy after getting on the helicopter. It was not that he was afraid of the employer he had never met, but as a top mercenary, he didn't want his mission to end in this way. That was too aggrieved. The helicopter sped in the air for more than an hour and finally arrived above the destination. However, both Cummins and Lynch looked a little ugly. Damn, there's a fire down there. What should we do? Looking at the flames flashing from time to time on the pasture below, Cummins's anger was bubbling out. Can't these damn guys wait for us for half a day? What should we do now? Don't worry, let's contact the employer first. Lynch frowned, took out his mobile phone and called Kinzu directly. However, no one answered the call after 2 calls. Just when Lynch wanted to give up and prepare to force his way in, the phone was finally connected. Hello, who is this? Kinzu's voice was not very friendly at this moment. He didn't expect those guys to come so suddenly. He was not ready yet, and hundreds of gang members surrounded them from all directions. Ahem, hearing Kinzu's dissatisfied voice, Lynch laughed twice and explained, Mr. Clean, we are mercenaries of Blackwater. I'm Lynch. We have arrived at the ranch now. I wonder how your situation is. What do you need us to do? Have you arrived at the ranch? Kinzu was a little confused. Yes, we are now above the ranch. Above the ranch? Kinzu listened carefully and could faintly hear the sound of the plane's engine. A touch of joy suddenly appeared on his face. Lynch, how about the firepower in your hands? Firepower? Lynch looked back and said a little embarrassedly, we only have submachine guns and a few grenades in our hands now. It is a bit inconvenient to take other weapons on the plane, so, grenade? How many? Hearing that Lynch actually had grenades in his hand, Kinzu was overjoyed and his voice became a little anxious. Not many, about 40 or 50 inches total. After a quick count, Lynch asked, Mr. Clean, just tell us what you need us to do. Chapter 1040 Overwhelming Firepower. Boom. Boom boom, the explosions sounded one after another in the night, making both sides of the war stunned. However, Keen Fen was notified in time, so there was no panic, but the gang members who attacked the ranch could not sit still. Damn, what's going on? Could the police come so quickly? The black man who led the group with a submachine gun in his hand looked a little surprised and doubtful. No, it's impossible. Mars, who was following behind, saw that his boss wanted to retreat, and he was immediately anxious. Even if the nearest police came here, it would take at least more than an hour. How could it be so fast? That's true. Hearing Mars say this, the black man also came back to his senses and felt relieved. Guys, since that yellow monkey wants to die, let's help him. Where are the rocket launchers? Bring them here. With the order of the big man, several rocket launchers were immediately carried out by his men. Aim at the open space in front of the villa and give them a warning first. The black man did not kill them right away. After all, they were not here to kill people this time, but for the green US dollars. If they killed the financiers inside, where would they go to ask for money? Boom boom boom, with several flashes of fire flashing in the night, there were suddenly several more craters on the open space in front of the villa. The nearest one even blew down the gate of the villa. Asshole, who did it? You have no eyes. The black man was immediately angry when he saw this, and cursed loudly. Watch out, who the hell hurts the financiers? I will sell his whole family to Africa. However, before he finished speaking, he heard the roar of a helicopter, and then a series of flames rose beside him. Damn, these guys actually have rocket launchers. Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, Kinzu was really scared this time. If those shells had not hit the open space but the villa, they would have been wiped out. Lynch, I don't care what method you use, just get rid of those rocket launchers first. Can you do it? Of course, Mr. Clean, it's easy. Lynch readily agreed to Kinzu's request. Just as he said, it was easy for them to get rid of a few gang members. Even if they had rocket launchers in their hands, it still couldn't change the fact that they were gang members. However, the rocket launchers were solved, but their helicopter was also scrapped. In order to attract the attention of the group of guys, the helicopter was flying at a low altitude just now, and was directly hit into a dive by their submachine guns. Fortunately, the guy driving the helicopter had good skills and successfully escaped at the last moment. Let's go together and beat them out. Seeing this, Kinzu did not hesitate and directly issued an order for a strong attack. Although there were less than 20 armed forces on their side and hundreds of armed elements on the other side, Qin Fen believed that these guys could not resist. However, imagination is beautiful, but reality is cruel. Boss, no, there are machine guns on the other side, we can't rush in. After a while, a dusty female bodyguard ran into the villa in a somewhat embarrassed manner. Machine gun? Kinzu was stunned when he heard the words, and under the somewhat nervous gaze of the female bodyguard, he slapped his thigh fiercely. Retreat, let them all retreat back. Kinzu said, calling several cowboys who had hidden in the villa early, and went to the warehouse together. Boss. Mr. Clean. When Kinzu returned to the villa, several female bodyguards including Dale, and 10 Blackwater bodyguards led by Jill and Cummings, except for those who stayed outside on guard, all retreated into the villa. Well, you're welcome. Kinzu nodded casually at the few people and ordered, Dale, bring your people up with me, and take Jill and you two to be responsible for the defense of the villa. Okay, boss/Mr. Clean. Just as the villa was shrinking its defense, the black man who was commanding the attack outside was also excitedly leading his men to surround the villa. Hehe, the boss is still thoughtful. Now I want to see where you can run. Rubbing his hands excitedly, the black man seemed to have foreseen that he would have a lot of US dollars in his account, and his big eyes were almost glowing green. Da-da-da-da, a crisp and rhythmic sound suddenly sounded, which made the black Khan who was in excitement stunned. He said angrily, who the hell shot again? Didn't I say it? I want them alive, alive. Big brother, no, it's not us, they are shooting. The younger brother who followed him said tremblingly. I know it wasn't you. I'm asking who fired the gun. The black Khan was still a little dazed. However, in response to his screams, there was only the crisp sound of the machine gun that was like tearing oilcloth. Da-da-da-da, damn, they also have machine guns. This time, the black Khan finally came to his senses and immediately let out a desperate roar. Where are our machine guns? Hurry, move them here. However, they only brought a light machine gun. How could they face these two modified heavy machine guns? Especially at such a close distance. Mars saw with his own eyes that a companion who was just talking and laughing with him was torn into pieces in the blink of an eye. Oh my god, I won't fight anymore. I want to go home. I won't fight anymore. I surrender, I surrender. Faced with this kind of fire suppression that was like a massacre, this group of gang members who were originally put together at the last minute could not hold on. Some threw their weapons directly, some stood up and ran back desperately, and some raised their hands above their heads to signal their surrender. However, facing all of this, Kinzu ignored them. Or rather, Kinzu couldn't see it at all. Because the sky was completely dark now. Except for the full moon above, the whole ranch was now dark, without a trace of light. Well, those flashing sparks didn't count. Boss, is that enough? Dale, who was in charge of operating the machine gun, gradually stopped after firing several ammunition boxes. Under this pressure, not many can hold on. We can go and take a look. Oh? Really? Kinzu, who was immersed in the roar of the machine gun, was stunned for a moment before saying, then stop first, I'll let Lynch and the others go and take a look. After receiving Kinzu's order, Lynch and Cummings both readily agreed and went out with their men. A moment later, Leader Jill ran back first and said with a grim expression, Mr. Clean, I think we have won. The other side has gone crazy. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Tesperama's Parasumerged on Mundo de Novelas Incredibles. Chapter 1041. Half Dead. Yes, they are all crazy. After being shot at close range by 2 heavy machine guns for half an hour, except for the dead, the rest of the non-crazy people were also scared silly. Damn, why haven't the police come yet? Kinzu frowned after looking at the time. It has been almost an hour since he called the police. Even if the police were mobilized from Billings, they should have arrived. It should be soon. What should we do now? Dale put away his gun and stretched out his hand to make a throat-cutting gesture. How about we go and get rid of them all now? All solved. Kinzu was stunned when he heard this, and then hurriedly shook his head. Let's not do this. We are not executioners. But what if they come next time? Kinzu hesitated. Compared to being on guard against the attacks of these guys all the time, he would rather be an executioner. B-boss, I don't think they have the courage. Kamis, who looked a little ugly, smiled bitterly and shook his head. After experiencing this kind of scene, even if they don't spend the rest of their lives in a mental hospital, they will never dare to violate you again. Well, what Kamis said makes sense. Kinzu nodded. Although he had not experienced that kind of scene, he could imagine it through the performance of the 2 mercenaries. Yada, just as Kinzu was still struggling, the long-lost sirens came from far away, and at the same time, Kamis's intercom also rang. Captain, the police are come in, do you want to let them go? Hearing this, Kamis couldn't help but look at Kinzu with an inquiring look. Although he said that just now, if Kinzu wanted to get rid of these guys, he would still find a way to delay that police for a while. Let them in, let's not deal with this mess. Shaking his head, Kinzu decided not to be the executioner. It's not that he was soft-hearted, or that he didn't dare to do it. The main thing is that if he did it, it would be difficult to explain to the police. Although they were acting in self-defense, it was still difficult to deal with so many deaths. After all, he was just a yellow man, and this was a world of white people. Not long after, a group of American soldiers surrounded the villa. The leader, a fat white man, turned around and said a few words, then came over with 2 fully armed men and a mercenary. Mr. Clean, are you not injured? How dare these damn gang members be so bold? Mr. Director should have arrested and sentenced them all long ago. As soon as he entered the room, the fat white man started talking, circling around Kinzu. If Kinzu hadn't been sure that he had never seen him before, he would have really thought that this guy was an old friend he hadn't seen for many years. Mr. Policeman, you are too polite. Thanks to the bodyguards, I didn't suffer any injuries. Kinzu laughed and exchanged a few pleasantries with him before asking, Mr. Atlanzu, I wonder what's going on outside. Outside? Atlanzu was stunned when he heard that. He thought Kinzu was worried that the gang members would run away, so he patted his chest and assured, Please rest assured, Mr. Clean, the gang members are being surrounded and suppressed outside. I guarantee that none of them will escape. No, Kinzu opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. After hesitating for a while, he reminded, Mr. Atlanzu, it's like this. My bodyguards may use heavy blows to protect my safety. Is everything okay? Too heavy? Atlanzu frowned subconsciously, but then relaxed again. It's okay, Mr. Clean, this is legitimate defense. Atlanzu explained with a smile. These guys broke into your territory and attacked you, which is a serious crime. Not to mention the heavy attack, it's okay even if they are all killed. However, just as he finished speaking, he saw one of his men running in with a pale face. What's wrong? You are so flustered, did someone escape? Although he didn't know what happened, Atlanzu had an ominous premonition in his heart. Dead, many people died. Looking at Kinzu with some fear, a white policeman who just ran in spoke intermittently. There was no way, although he was a policeman, he was also a normal person first. As long as he was a normal person, seeing a murderer who had killed many people standing in front of him, his legs would inevitably tremble. What did you say? After listening to the intermittent report of his men, Atlanzu seemed to be on fire. He jumped up from his seat and ran out directly. After a while, Atlanzu, with a pale face, re-entered the villa. Seeing Kinzu's indifferent expression, he couldn't help but shook his head and smiled bigly. Mr. Clean, you are not just a little heavy-handed. I can't do anything about this. Spreading his hands, Kinzu explained helplessly. There are at least 300 or 400 gang members, but there are only a few of us here. If I don't act ruthlessly, I might not be able to survive until you come. Atlanzu was speechless for a moment. Yes, if it were me, I would not act lightly if I had to save my life. But how would I explain this to my superiors? After all, the dead were people, not pigs. 100 or 200 casualties were not something I could handle alone. Thinking of this, Atlanzu apologized, got up, walked to their side and called the director. After a while, the call was connected. After Atlanzu reported the situation here, the other side was silent for a while, and then said, "As long as the other party has not violated any rules, report it truthfully." "Okay, Chief, I understand." After hanging up the phone, Atlanzu looked at the busy police officers outside, and then looked at Kinzu, who was sitting in the living room of the villa drinking coffee, and sighed helplessly. Sure enough, the power of capitalism is strong, and such things can be suppressed. However, this is better, at least I don't have to worry about it. Because of the need to count casualties and verify identities, a group of police officers have been busy until midnight, and they haven't cleaned up the scene yet. Seeing this, Kinzu touched his empty belly, waved his hand, and asked Dale to take the female soldiers to prepare midnight snacks for the police. Atlanzu did not refuse Kinzu's kindness. After signaling his men to stop and eat, he shook his head and said, "Mr. Clean, why don't you go and have a rest first? I don't know how long we will be busy here." "It doesn't matter. How can I sleep peacefully if you are all busy?" Smiling and waving his hands, Kinzu asked casually, "Mr. Atlanzu, I wonder if you have asked why these guys came to attack my manor?" This, Chapter 1042 Husband. Money can move people's hearts, and this saying is indeed true. The final result was similar to what Kinzu thought. These guys saw that he was rich and a yellow man, so they didn't feel any burden to rob him. In addition, the location here is very remote, so no one would know even if something happened, so they planned to do a big deal. However, they didn't expect Kinzu's defense here to be so abnormal. Hundreds of people were killed or wounded, but they couldn't even break into the villa. Kinzu was also a little helpless about this. Before coming here, he knew that this place was remote and would definitely be easily targeted by people, but he didn't expect it to come so quickly. "Boss, don't worry." Seeing that Kinzu's face was a little ugly, Thomas and Linge, who had just joined in, looked at each other and walked out together. "Leave the safety here to us, and we guarantee that no one will break in the future." Listening to the two people's solemn promises, Kinzu nodded without comment. Although he didn't believe that they could guard the whole ranch, he still smiled and said, "Since it's here, I'm relieved. As long as you can do it, I will make you satisfied with the salary." "Boss, I promise." Hearing that the salary might increase, Thomas and Ling's mouths were almost crooked with laughter. Although their salaries are already very high, who in this world would find money hot? Besides, it's just a ranch. Even if the area is a little larger, these are not a problem with high-tech means. The most important thing is that the main target of the ranch defensor is still the gangsters here, which is even simpler. Kinzu didn't understand the hearts of these mercenaries, and he didn't need to understand. Anyway, he just had to see the results in the end. The next day, Kinzu didn't get up too early, and even Zumengia was stopped by him when she shook her head. Because he wanted to leave some time for the police, the messy battlefield outside was not so easy to clean up. In this regard, Zumengia didn't refuse, and she felt at ease to enjoy the rare lazy sleep with Kinzu. At almost 11 o'clock in the afternoon, Kinzu couldn't sleep anymore, so he got up reluctantly. When he washed up and walked out of the villa, he found that the outside had been cleaned up almost completely, and the bloodstains and corpses on the ground had been swept away. However, the policeman who flashed by from time to time was still reminding people what had happened here. "Boss, are you really confident to leave the periphery to them?" Dale, dressed in a tight leather jacket, walked to Kinzu with her hands behind her back. In the morning, she had sent Thomas and Ling to the periphery of the ranch, where several wooden houses had been prepared for them. As for whether they were satisfied or not, that was not her concern. Why not? Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu looked at the Rocky Mountains in the distance and said with a smile, "It's just the periphery. Besides, even if something happens over there, don't you still have them?" Letting a few mercenaries to guard the periphery of the ranch, in fact, to put it bluntly, is just to install a few sentinels around the ranch. Even if something really happened to them, it would not affect Kinzu, but would buy him time to leave the ranch. But, what if they work together with others? Frowning, Dale always felt that Kinzu thought the problem was too simple. No, they won't. Kinzu shook his head decisively. Mercenaries value practical benefits the most. The conditions I give them are impossible for others to give them. In fact, Kinzu didn't say another sentence. That is, when they met last night, he had already sprayed a few drops of spiritual liquid on them. With this thing, Kinzu was 100% sure that these guys would not have second thoughts. Okay, since you said so, boss, then I will withdraw the people from outside. Seeing that Kinzu had made up his mind, Dale smiled helplessly and picked up the intercom to notify the 2 female bodyguards at the gate to withdraw. Okay, you go to do your work, I'll just walk around. After Dale finished the call, Kinzu smiled and waved his hand, and began to stroll around the ranch. The progress of the airport runway construction is not slow. Although only a few days have passed, with the help of modern machinery, the runway model has been built. It seems that it will be completed soon. However, what makes Kinzu a little puzzled is that there is no news from Boston. Especially after receiving Kinzu's order, the fishery has stopped supplying, which makes it even more difficult to investigate. At this time, Kinzu even regretted that he should not have asked Will and others to stop. Although the catch of the fishery is not much, it doesn't matter if there are a few days. It's okay to wait until the mastermind is caught before talking about these things. However, at this point, he can't say anything and can only wait slowly. Fortunately, Chenmu already has several bodyguards guarding him, so there is no need to worry about his safety. 11 Lulu, just as Kinzu was leaning against a big tree in the pasture in a daze, a white shadow passed by his eyes, accompanied by a silver bell-like laughter. Clean, what are you doing here? Do you want to join us? Looking up, Kinzu was surprised to find that it was Mobuka who was riding Shiabai on the ranch. Mobuka and Donit had been at the ranch for several days, but Kinzu had never had time to spend with the 2 women. Especially yesterday, the 2 girls had personally experienced the battle, but Kinzu didn't even have the chance to comfort them. Now that he suddenly saw Mobuka, Kinzu couldn't bear it anymore. When Shiabai came to his side, he jumped on her. Let's go out for a walk today. Where to go? Before Mobuka could react, she felt her waist tightened and a strong hand was around her waist. Haha, just a walk. Kinzu really didn't know where to go, but he saw Mobuka riding a horse alone and subconsciously jumped on her. However, since he was on the horse, he definitely couldn't go around the villa. If he was seen, it would be difficult to explain. Looking up at the sky, seeing that it was still early, Kinzu simply kicked his horse's belly and ran towards the Rocky Mountains. You haven't told me yet, what's the matter with you coming here this time? As he walked, Kinzu put his head on Mobuka's shoulder, put his mouth close to her ear, and asked softly. It would be a lie for Kinzu to say that he didn't feel guilty about these 2 women. But no matter how guilty he felt, he couldn't just abandon Zumengyo and be with them, right? However, what he didn't expect was that these 2 women didn't know what was wrong with them and actually got married on their own. This made Kinzu feel relieved, but also a little guilty. After all, the one he was holding was a real married woman. A husband. Chapter 1043 Children's Problems. Clean, I want a child. In the afternoon sun, on the vast pasture, Mobuka, wearing a pair of denim shorts, leaned lazily in Kinzu's arms. Child. Kinzu was a little stunned when he heard this. Want a child? He felt like he was still a child, and he was going to be someone else's father. Yeah. As if afraid that Kinzu would misunderstand something, Mobuka immediately added. Don't worry, after the child is born, Onid and I will take good care of him and won't make things difficult for you. No, what do you mean? Kinzu, who was a little dazed before, immediately became unhappy. Throw it away after use. Who do you think I am? Mobuka was a little speechless. Why is the situation a little different from what he thought? He said he wanted a child, shouldn't you be worried about the custody and the inheritance of property in the future? Kinzu could more or less guess what Mobuka was thinking, but he didn't pay attention to it. Instead, he asked hesitantly, is it too early to have a child now? After all, you, Onid, have just graduated. Don't you want to enjoy yourself for a few years? It's not too early. Many of my classmates are already mothers. When talking about this, Mobuka looked very confident. But, after struggling for a long time, Kinzu still couldn't think of any reason to refuse. Although he hadn't considered the issue of children, since Mobuka brought it up, how could Kinzu refuse? What reason did he have to refuse? People have already followed you regardless of their status, so isn't it okay to have a child? Kinzu looked a little melancholy. If Mobuka hadn't reminded him, he would have forgotten that he was already a father. But, he wasn't married yet, so is it really okay to have a child like this? Although Kinzu was a little confused by Mobuka's sudden request, he didn't forget what his main task was now. Boston. Only by solving the trouble in Boston can he and Mobuka concentrate on the great cause of making a baby. So, after sending Mobuka back to the villa, Kinzu thought about it and turned his thoughts to cheese. Now not only did the ingredients of his manna flow out from somewhere, but even his fishery was in danger of being destroyed. If those big guys were allowed to live in the fishery, let alone raising fish and shrimp, it would be good if they were not eaten to death. This is really a difficult problem. Looking at the two great white sharks that were frantically hunting not far from him, Kinzu's heart was bleeding. He wanted to go up and beat the two guys to death with one tail. But he couldn't. It's not that he couldn't beat them, but that he couldn't kill them all. If you kill these two great white sharks today, there may be 4 more tomorrow, and 8 the day after tomorrow. The ocean is so big, who knows how many big guys are hidden. Forget it, let's go and see the situation on the shore first. After a long time, Kinzu sighed and went directly to the current location of the fishery. There is no way to solve the problem now. Even the system has no good idea about it. Because in the original setting of the system, Kinzu's fishery is a private fishery, and it is a closed one. In this case, no matter how amazing the fishery is, only a few people know about it, and it will not attract large marine creatures nearby like it is now. But what it never expected was that Kinzu's ranch was actually open, and it was the kind that anyone could come and go as they wanted. Putting aside the distracting thoughts in his mind, Kinzu shook his thick snake body and walked quickly towards the fishery. However, when he reached the shore and slowly shrank his body, he found that the fishery was quiet at the moment, without even a trace of light. Hey, where are the people here? After getting ashore, Kinzu swam his little body, wanting to go to Il's side to take a look, but found that the entire fishery was surprisingly quiet. Are they all out? After looking at several rooms one by one, Kinzu was a little speechless. Wasn't it too unfortunate that he came here? What day is it today? It shouldn't be. April Fool's Day has just passed. There shouldn't be any lively festivals recently. In any case, there is indeed no one in the living area. Kinzu even went to the dock to check it out. No one is there. This is really a wasted trip. Kinzu shook his tail in boredom and walked around the ranch. The idea of following the few people faded. Let's go back first and come back later. Kinzu, who had made up his mind, was about to leave when he suddenly heard a car horn outside, and he could vaguely hear the voices of several people talking. Without thinking too much, or even hesitating, Kinzu twisted his body and went to the door. The place where the fishery is now is not the Kinzu ranch before. After all, it has been bought by someone, and it is still very inconvenient for you to live there. Although the princess will not do anything for Kinzu's sake, what if? If they didn't find anything by then, and his group of fishermen were all around, there was a high possibility of bad luck. So, for the sake of his own life and the lives of the fishermen, he still found a berth for his boat at the small pier in Revere. Drink more, Simon, why are you pulling me? Just when Kinzu arrived at the gate, a familiar voice came to his ears. Will's voice. Drinking. What's going on? That guy usually looks very stable, how could he go out to drink at this time? No, we said we should go back first, maybe they will come back tomorrow. Impossible, impossible. It must be possible, otherwise they wouldn't have told you before they left. It seemed that he was moved by Simon and was drunk. Will's vague voice disappeared, leaving Simon alone to support him. However, it was very difficult for Simon to walk while supporting a guy who was already drunk. Especially since this guy is a man, and he is quite strong. Most importantly, he is not honest. He keeps struggling, shaking his head and saying something. Fortunately, the distance from the gate to the dormitory is not very far. After walking for a while, the two stopped in front of a small villa. After Simon fumbled to open the door, he finally helped this guy back home. What happened to this guy? How did he end up like this? Kinzu, who witnessed everything, felt a little puzzled. After thinking about it carefully, he regained his consciousness, found his mobile phone next to him, and dialed it directly. Chapter 1044. A solution that is not a solution. Ding-ling-ling, the crisp ringing of the phone sounded so harsh in the silent night. Who? Look who it is. Will, who was lying on the bed and felt a little dizzy, waved his hand weakly, signaling Simon to help him answer the phone. Simon didn't hesitate to take his phone from the side. However, as soon as he took a look, Simon's casual expression froze on his face. Boss's call. What? Will, who was rubbing his head with a painful expression, froze his hands and raised his head in surprise. Boss, why is he calling at this time? How do I know? Simon swallowed his saliva and looked at Will at a loss. What should I do now? What should I do? How do I know what to do? Will didn't care about drinking to relieve his sorrow. He sat up from the bed and grabbed the phone. Hello, boss, what's up? Nothing, where are you? Listening to Will's voice without a trace of drunkenness on the phone, Kinzu was a little confused. Did he see it wrong just now? Me? I'm at home, what's wrong with the boss? Although he pretended to be calm, Will was sweating coldly on his forehead at this moment. Someone has informed on him. The boss has planted spies around him. Because Kinzu couldn't call to ask where he was for no reason. Since he asked, it means that he already knows something. Hehe, Kinzu smiled lightly twice. Will, I will entrust the fishery to you, I hope you won't let me down. Boss, I won't let you down, I definitely won't. As if he was talking to himself, and as if he was promising something, Will's voice at this moment was very firm. I hope so. Kinzu didn't say anything else and hung up the phone directly. He didn't expect Will to be so drunk that he could still answer the phone as usual. I wanted to take the opportunity to ask a few more questions, but now it seems that he is also drunk without being drunk. However, this made Kinzu more certain that there must be something about the fishery that he didn't know. I hope you don't go too far, otherwise you will all pack up and leave. Lying on the soft big bed in the ranch villa, Kinzu had already begun to wonder whether he should replace all the blood in the fishery. After all, the core of the fishery is himself, and the quality of the fish raised is not something that fishermen like them can decide. Therefore, as long as they can cast nets and catch fish, he can hire anyone, and there is no need to specially select these old fishermen. Will, what should we do now? Do we still have to keep it secret for them? Since hanging up the phone, Will has been in a daze, almost making Simon anxious. He knows his boss's character, he has never been afraid of big trouble, especially with a group of female bodyguards who were willing to kill people without blinking an eye. He must not let him misunderstand. Wait for me to think about it, wait for me to think about it. Sitting weakly on the bed, Will rubbed his head in pain. He was confused now. Was his choice right or wrong? Just as Kinzu guessed, as the general manager of the fishery, how could Will not find out that someone was playing tricks? But what could he do? On the one hand, he was his friend and neighbor for many years, and on the other hand, he was his boss who he had just known for less than a year. What should he do? More importantly, they had the same skin color. Although Will didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that he still looked down on the yellow people in his heart. Of course, these were all objective reasons. If this matter was really that simple, he wouldn't want to drown his sorrows in alcohol. Will knew very well that Kinzu was different from other yellow people. Not to mention his magical skills, just the female bodyguards who followed him could make most people daunted. So, when Will realized that Kinzu might know something, he was immediately in a dilemma. If Kinzu didn't find out, he could still turn a blind eye. At worst, he would just say he didn't know anything. But now Kinzu obviously knew something. If he continued to hide it, it would be a bit unreasonable. Kinzu didn't know that Will almost pulled out his few hairs because of his phone call. After thinking about how to deal with the people in the fishery, Kinzu didn't care about this, but concentrated on studying the ecological problems of the fishery. He had given them the opportunity, and whether they cherished it or not depended on their own choice. However, not worrying about personnel issues did not make Kinzu feel relieved. Because the problems on the bottom of the fishery were much more difficult to solve than these simple personnel problems. Let alone the great white sharks and killer whales that were always there, Kinzu gave up the idea of sowing fish fry this spring and summer. After all, he didn't know how much to sow to feed these guys. Is there no good way to solve it? When Kinzu couldn't think of any good solution, he finally remembered that he seemed to have a system. It must be said that since it had been dormant for a while, the system's presence has become less and less. Dear host, please explore the functions of the fishery by yourself. The mechanical voice of the system made Kinzu's forehead black. Forget it, you should just continue to sleep. Kinzu rolled his eyes in frustration and decided to think of a solution by himself to save himself the trouble. However, sometimes when you concentrate on thinking about something, you may not be able to come up with a solution. But when you don't think about it, you will often have extra inspiration. Just as Kinzu walked down the stairs bored and sat at the door of the villa looking into the distance, he accidentally saw a few little Alaskans walking around under the leadership of Daho and her, and an idea suddenly flashed through his mind. Ha ha ha, this method must be feasible. Qin slapped his thigh and stood up suddenly, scaring Zhu Mengyo, who was holding a fruit beside him. Qin, what method makes you so happy? Subconsciously patting her tall and plump breasts, Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes at Qin unhappily. Hee, nothing, I just thought of how to solve the problem of the fishery. Qin touched his head a little embarrassedly. Oh? How to solve it? Zhu Mengyo's eyes suddenly lit up when he heard it. She knew that this problem had troubled Qin for many days. Now that she heard him say that he could solve it, how could she not be curious? Ha ha, of course, fire them all. Qin laughed and said half truthfully. They eat my food and drink my drinks, but in the end they don't listen to me. What's the point of having such people? Just fire them all. The smile on her face froze a little. Zhu Mengyo never thought that the solution Qin mentioned was actually this. Chapter 1045. No one is a fool. Although he didn't want to admit it, Qin had to admit that some people just deserve to be punished. He had already made up his mind to fire all the guys in the fishery and recruit new people, but who called first? Boss, do you have time now? I have something to tell you. Oh? Have you figured it out? Qin waved his hand and signaled Mobuka, who was massaging his shoulders behind him, to stop first. I'm very busy here. You only have 10 minutes. Do you understand? Okay, I understand. When Will heard that Qin was very busy, his heart had already fallen to the bottom. Unexpectedly, Qin changed the subject and gave him another 10 minutes, which made Will breathe a sigh of relief. Although it was only 10 minutes, it was enough for him. After all, he really figured it out and didn't want to fool around. Boss, first of all, I want to apologize to you. I failed to live up to your expectations and failed to manage the fishery well, so that it has become like this now. Don't talk about those useless things. Before Will could continue, he was interrupted by a sharp shout. Will, you only have 8 minutes left now. I hope to hear something useful. Okay. Taking a deep breath, Will said in a low voice. Boss, you should have guessed that someone in the fishery is secretly reselling the catch. I have been hesitating about how to tell you before, but now I have figured it out. Well, Qin nodded without commenting, and said nothing, motioning Will to continue. Boss, you probably can't guess who this person is. With a big smile, Will uttered 2 words with some difficulty. What? It's him. Qin stood up from the sofa, and even scared Mobuka and didn't bother to comfort her. He asked anxiously. Will, are you sure you didn't say the wrong name? Will didn't have any special reaction to Qin's questioning, but his voice seemed even lower. If it was someone else, how could I help him conceal it? Qin was stunned when he heard this, but then he nodded in agreement. Yes, he should have thought of it long ago. If it was someone else, Will, as the steward of the fishery, would not be able to ignore it. Although they are all old residents for many years, they are all white people. The biggest characteristic of white people is that they are more autonomous and independent. To put it bluntly, it is selfish. For such a person, do you expect him to help others conceal their crimes without any benefits? However, this cannot be blamed on Qin, who made him a yellow man. At the beginning, he subconsciously thought that all might choose to help them for this reason. Those who are not of my race must have different hearts. This saying is not only popular in China. Will, I will rush over right away, and you should be careful. Rubbing his head, Qin said with some worry before hanging up the phone. This matter is quite unusual, and he dare not guarantee whether Simon will do something extreme after learning about Will's betrayal. At this time, Qin suddenly hated the American gun-carrying order. With a gun in hand, Simon could do something before he arrived. Hello, Brother Chen, this is Qin. Qin, who was a little worried, quickly took out his mobile phone and called Chen Mu, and briefly told him the situation here. Boss, don't worry, I'll take people over right away. Compared with Qin's slightly worried tone, Chen Mu's voice was almost excited. After so many days of hard work, there was finally a breakthrough. Chen Mu believed that as long as this guy named Simon was arrested, the whole thing would be revealed. In this way, he would not be monitored all day long. Well, the bodyguards Qin sent to him were no different from surveillance in this guy's eyes. Because even when he went to the toilet, there would be a strong man standing next to him to protect his safety. I hope nothing will happen. I don't know why, Qin always had an inexplicable worry in his heart. It was as if Simon already knew their plan. No, I still have to go and take a look. Turning upstairs, Kinzu packed up some things and flew to Boston with a team of 5 people led by Commis, accompanied by Dale. I have to say that Kinzu's intuition is sometimes quite sharp. At this moment, in the dormitory building of that fishing farm, Will looked at Simon, who had a gloomy face in front of him, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It seems that you already know. Simon did not speak, just staring at Will in front of him. His face was gloomy and terrible. After a long time, Simon's mouth twitched slightly and uttered 3 words. Why? His voice was not very loud, as if he was talking to himself, but also seemed to be questioning. Because he is too powerful. Looking up, Will asked bigly. Don't you find it strange? How did he know such a secret thing? What does it matter? Slamming the table, Simon suddenly stood up and shouted hysterically. Even if he knew, so what? If you don't tell him, he won't think of us. At most, he can find a reason to resign. What can that Asian guy do to you? Simon, you think too simply. Sighing, Will spread his back and said weakly. You should have seen the boss's temper. He never backed down when facing a mad dog. When he knows what we did, do you think he will not pursue it? Even if we resign and leave at the time, have you ever thought about it? He is very rich, with a lot of money. As long as he takes out a little bit, countless people will come to find us. By then, where can we hide? Will's words were like thunder, striking Simon's heart nakedly. He knew these problems, but he didn't dare to think about them. Because as long as he thought about it, he didn't have the courage to do it. But he was short of money, very short of money. So, when those people found him and asked him to help get some fish, Simon didn't refuse. Or rather, he couldn't refuse. The price offered by those guys was too tempting. However, now that Will said that, and thinking of Kinzu's past deeds, Simon's legs trembled a little. Hey, Simon, go now, go as far as you can. Looking at Simon, Will sighed helplessly. In fact, he didn't say another sentence. Why should he give up his good life and take such a big risk? It's you, Simon, who stole and sold the fish. What does it have to do with me? I haven't even seen the money I earned, but I have to take the same risk as you. Do I, Will, look like a fool? Chapter 1046. Want to leave? Too late. While Simon and Will were confronting each other in the dormitory of the fish farm, Kinzu had already boarded a plane to New York. However, it would take at least 8 or 9 hours to arrive in New York, which made Kinzu feel a little uneasy. If something really happened, even if he rushed over, it would be too late. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Kinzu suddenly remembered that he also had people in New York. Dale, I'll take a nap first, call me if you have anything. After instructing the female bodyguard beside him, Kinzu narrowed his eyes and shifted his thoughts to Cheese. Because his main body was too large and easy to expose the target, Kinzu did not forget to shrink his body when he rushed to Will's house. Simon, go quickly, the farther the better. I think there will be a wanted order for you in New York tomorrow. When Kinzu sneaked into Will's villa, he just heard Will persuading Simon to run away. This guy, if you let this bastard run away, I'll show you how I'll deal with you. However, to Kinzu's surprise, Simon did not appreciate Will's kindness. Run. Where can I run? Simon sat down again with a self-deprecating smile, and his voice seemed very calm. Do you think we have to wait until tomorrow? I believe that Boston Police Department has already taken action. If I go out now, won't I run into them? No, they won't be that fast. Shaking his head, Will said with certainty. Even if the boss starts calling the Boston Police Department after hanging up the phone, they won't act that fast. After all, your case is not a big case. However, Simon smiled disdainfully at Will's words. Will, do you believe it yourself? Will opened his mouth, but suddenly didn't know what to say. Do you believe it? Of course he didn't believe it. With Kinzu's relationship with the governor, not to mention that Simon would be arrested if he went out now, it is very likely that the police helicopter will arrive soon. But can he say he doesn't believe it? Although Simon didn't do anything now, this guy suddenly came here, obviously he didn't have any good intentions. Just when Will was still thinking about how to trick Simon out, Simon, who was sitting on the sofa, suddenly moved. He slowly sat up, put his hand into his arms, and slowly took out a pistol under Will's nervous gaze. Will, this matter started because of you. Don't you think about giving me an explanation? Simon, what do you mean? Although he had already guessed it, when Simon really took out a gun, Will still felt angry and panic in his heart. Have you forgotten who brought you into the industry? Who taught you how to fish, and who introduced you to a girlfriend and gave you a family, and now you treat me like this? Don't mention that bitch to me. Originally, when Will talked about the first few, Simon's face showed a trace of guilt, but when he talked about women, Simon seemed to be stimulated by something and stood up suddenly. If it weren't for her, would I have ended up like this? If it weren't for the money, would I have been attracted by the conditions they offered? It's because you introduced a bad woman to me that I'm on this path now. Don't you need to be responsible? Responsible? How do you want me to be responsible? Although Will had already scolded Simon in his heart, in order to survive, he didn't dare to continue to provoke this guy, and could only listen to what he wanted first. As long as he didn't kill himself, everything would be fine. Perhaps because he knew Will's heart, Simon asked for a huge sum without hesitation. $500,000, as long as you can find me 500,000, I will leave immediately. How is that possible? Do you think I'm the boss? Will was almost laughing out of anger. Asking him, a man with an annual income of only $50,000 or $60,000, for 500,000. Isn't this an international joke? Of course I know you don't have it. As if he had expected Will to answer like this, Simon sat down slowly, playing with the gun in his hand, and said, "You don't have it, but the Asian guy does. Call him now and tell him that if you don't pay $500,000, he will prepare to collect your body. Do you think you will agree?" Will said angrily. "Will you pay $500,000 for someone who just betrayed the ranch?" "Oh, it depends on your value in his heart." Although he felt that what Will said made sense, Simon was not moved. It was because he had no money on him now. Yes, he participated in the reselling of the ranch's catch, but in order not to be discovered, he did not sell much each time. Although the unit price was not low, the average income was only $1,000 or $2,000. The reason why he did not run away immediately after the incident was not because he did not want to run, but simply because he did not have enough money. "Okay, I can make the call, but I can't guarantee whether the boss will agree or not." Faced with Simon's insistence and the black muzzle of the gun, Will had to pick up the phone beside him and start yelling, although he felt very aggrieved. But at this moment, Simon's hand holding the gun suddenly hurt, and the gun in his hand fell directly to the floor. Dang, the two people present were stunned at the same time. What happened? Although stunned, Will did not miss this opportunity. He stepped forward and bent down to grab the gun. "Fuck. Get out of my way," Simon reacted a little slower. Seeing that Will was about to touch the gun, he rushed forward like crazy. However, what made Simon feel desperate was that at the moment when his hand was about to touch the handle of the gun that was still in front of him suddenly moved forward and ran directly into Will's hand. "No, this is impossible, this is absolutely impossible." Seeing Will stand up and point the gun at himself, Simon collapsed immediately. "Hey, man, although I also find it incredible, this is the fact now." Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, Will felt more relieved than happy. He knew very well that if he hadn't been able to snatch the pistol just now, this guy would definitely not let him down. "William, no, master, let's talk it over." Facing the black muzzle of the gun, Simon forced a smile that was uglier than crying, and said flatteringly, "Put the gun down first, it's easy to fire it accidentally." "Accidental discharge? It's okay, I don't mind." Shaking his head, Will decisively rejected this guy's proposal. "What a joke. When you were holding the gun just now, why didn't you worry about accidental discharge?" "Ahem, master, I suddenly think your proposal makes sense. I'll leave now, go abroad now, and I'll go far away." Without waiting for Will to answer, Simon said as he stepped back, wanting to leave this place of trouble quickly. Bang! After a crisp gunshot, a small black hole appeared on the floor under Simon's feet. "I told you to leave just now but you refused. Now it's too late. Just stay here and let's wait for the boss to come." Chapter 1047. I already have a boyfriend. "Will, do you really want to kill them all?" Simon's face looked very ugly at the moment. If his eyes could kill, Simon would have been torn into pieces by him. "Kill them all?" Will shook his head. "Simon, you think too much. I'm saving you." "Save me?" Ha ha, Simon looked at Will with some disdain. "If you really want to save me, you should let me go now, instead of handing me over to the Asian guy. Why can't you figure it out?" Will sighed helplessly. "Even if I let you go now, where can you go? Europe? Or Africa? What do you care where I go?" Simon snorted coldly. "Anywhere is better than going to jail. Then you'll never come back. And, do you really think you can run away?" Will felt a little sad for his apprentice. Didn't Mad Dog run away? Didn't the others who offended the boss run away? What happened to them in the end? Simon was a little speechless, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Just like what he said before, it's not that he didn't think about these things, but he didn't dare to think about them. Because as soon as he thought about it, he lost the courage to fight. Simon, just wait here for the boss to come. Will put down the gun in his hand. Although you made a mistake, it's not a big mistake. When the time comes, you admit your mistake and help the boss find that person behind the scenes. I think he will give you a chance. Even if you end up in jail, you won't stay there for too long. It must be said that as the actual manager of the fishery, Will is still very good at fooling people. Although he got into a dead end before, when he realized his mistake, he quickly corrected it. This guy, you got away with it. Kinzu, who was staying in the dark, saw that the situation seemed to have stabilized, and he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. If a murder happened in his fishery, it would be really difficult to deal with it. Although the police station would not trouble him, it would be difficult to recruit people for a fishery where an accident had occurred. After all, no one wants to work in a place where a murder has occurred. White people cherish their lives very much. Ding-ling-ling, after an unknown amount of time, a quick phone ring suddenly sounded, startling Kinzu, who was dreaming. Boss, the person has been controlled. What should we do next? Hand him over to the police? Chen Mu's voice sounded proud on the phone. What do you mean by handing him over? I've handed him over to the police. Go find the murderer behind the scenes for me. Kinzu rubbed his head and muttered unhappily, Brother Chen, are you excited and stupid? I finally found a breakthrough, but you actually want to give it to someone else. Well, I just think the police are more reliable in handling cases. Chen Mu was a little embarrassed. Perhaps because he was used to being a law-abiding citizen, Chen Mu's first reaction when encountering things was to hand a problem over to the police to solve, and he just had to wait for the result. However, Kinzu thought differently from him. Because he didn't know how powerful the mastermind behind the scenes was. What if he handed the person over to the police station, and the other party hit someone else inside the police station? Wouldn't it be a waste of time? Therefore, Kinzu planned to find out the mastermind first, and then consider whether to hand him over to the police. After hanging up the phone, Chen Mu couldn't help but feel fortunate that he had not notified the police station before, otherwise it would be difficult to explain now. You guys keep an eye on him, and the others go to control the fishery. No one is allowed to enter or leave before the boss comes. After giving a few instructions to his bodyguards, Chen Mu glared at Simon, who was tied up, and strode into the house. He was going to have a good chat with Will about when the fishery would be able to resume supply. Several new restaurants were about to start business, and it would be embarrassing if there was no stock at the time. With several people waiting with different moods, Kinzu's plane landed at Boston Airport on time. Boss, please come this way. The person who came to pick him up was a bodyguard under Chen Mu. He was still in the fishery, guarding Simon every step of the way. According to him, unless Kinzu himself came, even the King of Heaven would not be able to take people away from him. Well, I have to say that Kinzu was very benefited by this guy's behavior. After more than half an hour of travel, Kinzu and his group finally arrived at the fishery. Boss. Seeing Kinzu get off the car, Chen Mu and Will, who were waiting at the door, hurried to greet him. Well, where is Simon? He won't run away, right? He nodded. Although he knew that Simon couldn't run away, Kinzu was still a little worried when he saw the two of them coming out. How is it possible? I put 3 people inside to watch him. Chen Mu stretched out his hand and gestured inside. Boss, let's go in and talk about it. Well, let's go in and talk about it. Kinzu glanced at Combs, and after seeing him make a gesture that everything was safe, he followed Chen Mu and the others in. This is not to say that Kinzu doesn't trust Chen Mu and Will, but after this happened, he must consider his own safety. Especially in Revere, there are several other princes. It is said that they have almost dug 3 feet into the ground a remnant of the Appalachian Mountains. I don't know if they have discovered that they have been tricked by themselves. Boss, the situation is not good. After entering the living room, Chen Mu glanced at Simon, who was lying on the ground pretending to be dead. I don't know whether this guy really doesn't know or is pretending not to know. Anyway, he knows nothing. Now he only asked about the daily delivery location and a bank account for him to transfer money. Bank account? Show it to me. Kinzu expected that he would not get anything out of him, so he did not react. But when he heard that Chen Mu actually asked about the bank account, he immediately became interested. Here, I don't know which bank it is from, and I didn't even ask the name of the remitter. Although Qinzu didn't say anything, Chen Mu still felt a little embarrassed. At the same time, in his heart, he also scolded Simon. You said that it has come to this point. Is it useful to be stubborn? Tell the truth, maybe the boss will give you a good answer. Well, from this point of view, Qinzu is not a good bird in Chen Mu's eyes. Hi, Jennifer, how are you doing recently? After receiving the note from Chen Mu, Qinzu did not hesitate and called his personal assistant directly. Moreover, because he was looking for help, Qinzu's tone of voice was very gentle this time, which directly confused Jennifer on the other side. Mr. Clean, I already have a boyfriend, it's impossible for us to be together. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 1048 Slums. Listening to Jennifer's somewhat frightened voice on the phone, Qinzu's face was full of black lines. Am I so lustful? Although I'm a little bit lustful at ordinary times, just a little bit, it shouldn't scare you like this, right? Fortunately, the quality of this mobile phone is good, and others can't hear the sound inside, so it doesn't destroy the current serious atmosphere. Ahem, Jennifer, I mainly want to ask you for help this time. Pretending not to hear the girl's words just now, Qinzu briefly described the matter, and then smiled and said, this is just a small matter, you should be able to help with it, right? However, although Qinzu was laughing, the threatening meaning in his words could be heard by anyone. This, Jennifer almost cried. What a joke. Does this boss think that he can check other people's information unscrupulously just because he works in a bank? Who dares to disclose other people's information without the permission of the FBI? If it was an ordinary person, it would be fine, but the account Qinzu gave her was obviously a bank gold card member. What should I do? If there hadn't been the mistake just now, Jennifer could have directly rejected Qinzu's unreasonable request. However, she had just offended him once, and if she refused again, Jennifer could guess what the consequences would be. Forget it, at most she would be scolded, and with this big customer in hand, the bank would not do anything to her. I'll try. Although there was no one else in the office at the moment, Jennifer still secretly looked around, and then entered the account number like a thief. Boss, I checked, I found that this account is opened by a person named James in the Boston branch. James? Qinzu was delighted, and then asked anxiously. Address? Do you have this guy's address? Yes, the address is in the 3rd block of Revere. Jennifer paused here, a little hesitant, not knowing whether to continue. If she remembered correctly, it should be a slum, right? But how could a bank's distinguished gold card user live in a slum? Did she remember it wrong? Jennifer, what's wrong? Although immersed in the excitement of finding the mastermind, Qinzu still keenly noticed Jennifer's hesitation. Boss, maybe I remembered it wrong. Shaking her head, Jennifer hesitated again and again, and still said her guess. There was no way. If Qinzu could find this guy this time, it would be good. If he couldn't find him, then he would think that he was fooling him with a random address, which would be a loss. You mean, this might be a fake address? Frowning, Qinzu was also a little undecided. According to Jennifer's statement, it was very likely that this was a fake address. Forget it, I'll go over and take a look first. Sighing, Qinzu thanked Jennifer and hung up the phone. He really didn't expect that the black market behind the scenes was well prepared for his little catch. Boss, how is it? Did you find the person? Seeing Qinzu coming back, Chen Mu stood up in an instant, and the expression on his face looked very anxious. He had been preparing for this day for a long time, and even thought about the fate of the mastermind. It's not certain yet, let's go and take a look. Qinzu waved his hand and signaled his bodyguards to assemble. Except for 2 who stayed to guard Simon and Will, the other more than 10 fully armed bodyguards all got into the car with them. Under the skillful control of the bodyguards, a line of 3 luxury bulletproof cars quickly left the fishery and headed straight for Revere. Boss, are you sure it's this? After getting off the car, Chen Mu looked a little surprised at the street full of garbage in front of him. The mastermind who made him so scared for so long lives in such a place. It should be. Qinzu, who was not very sure at first, was a little discouraged at this time. He didn't expect that Revere, which was full of prosperous scenes, would actually have such slums. However, since he had already come here, Kinzu didn't mind taking a few steps. It's just ahead, let's go check it out, if not, then go back. After making up his mind, Kinzu waved at Kmiza, signaling him to lead the team in front. Although he was not sure whether the real target was here, Kinzu would not be stupid enough to lead the way and let the bodyguards follow behind and stare blankly. Soon, after passing through several alleys, Kinzu and his team arrived near the destination. Boss, let's go in and take a look first. Kmiza was very conscious of being a bodyguard. After signaling Kinzu to wait outside, he led a few people and carefully moved over. Bang! 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 To Kinzu's surprise, after a knock on the door, there was a fierce exchange of gunfire in front. Everyone be alert, go and support Kmiza. Dale's eyes were serious, and without waiting for Kinzu to speak, he directly asked the remaining two members of Kmiza's team to follow. Fortunately, the gunshots came quickly and went away quickly. Before the support team went up, Kmiza came over with a few people. One of the guys with a full beard was particularly eye-catching. Haha, it seems that Jennifer's information is still very reliable. Kinzu laughed immediately when he saw the familiar face. Is it you? When the few people came closer, James finally saw Kinzu's appearance clearly, and his expression became a little stunned. Why did you come here? Why? Are you surprised? Kinzu stepped forward and stood in front of James, his voice seemed very calm. Should I give you a good beating first, or should you explain everything now? Explanation? What should I explain? James's expression seemed a little confused. Didn't I just buy your catch a few times? What's there to say? Looking at James's self-evident expression, Kinzu didn't know how to answer for a while. Indeed, if you think about it from another angle, what this guy said is not wrong. But is it so simple? It seems that you are not going to tell the truth. Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu was not going to waste time talking to this guy, and directly interrupted Thomas and waved his hand. Take him back and let him understand the situation first. Hey, wait. Seeing the expression on Kinzu's face, James seemed to realize something, and shouted anxiously. If you have anything to say, just talk here. Illegal detention is illegal. Oh, you still know that it is illegal? Kinzu curled his lips in disdain. But I broke the law, what can you do to me? You little guy, you know you broke the law now, why didn't you know it when you were causing trouble for me? Chapter 1049. The Clue is interrupted. Revere Fishery Dormitory. Kinzu sat on the sofa, looking at James in front of him with a terrified face, feeling a little headache. The address Jennifer gave was correct. James was indeed James, and he didn't find the wrong person. But who can tell me what the situation is now? This guy actually said he didn't know anything. He wasn't the one who transferred the money, he had never been to the fishery, and he didn't even know who Simon was. As for how this guy knew Kinzu, that's because the gang he belonged to had planned to take over the fishery before. Boss, this guy didn't lie. Facing Kinzu's questioning eyes, Dale nodded very affirmatively. Although I don't know how Dale judged that James didn't lie, Kinzu believed her. Since she said no, then it was true. In other words, the person he went to great lengths to catch was completely an outsider. No, it can't be said that he was completely an outsider. At least the bank card was his. Mr. Clean, how come I don't know what's going on? That card is definitely not mine. Seeing Kinzu put his attention back on him, James almost cried. Who did he offend? He finally made some money yesterday and planned to have a party at home today, but he knew that someone broke in and took him away at the beginning. Originally, he thought it was a raid by a rival gang. James was ready to see God, but in the end he found that he seemed to have nothing to do with it. Is this card really not yours? Kinzu frowned and looked at James, his expression was a little tangled. Jennifer would definitely not lie to him. Since he said that the owner of the card was James, it must be him. But since Dale said that James was not lying, it meant that he really didn't know about it. Could it be the Simon lead? That's not right. I have seen the transfer record and it is indeed this card number. Touching his chin without a single beard, Kinzu looked a little confused. It seems that he has walked into a dead end. Boss, could it be that someone else is using that card? Dale glanced at James uncertainly. Or someone else used his identity to apply for the card? I've thought about that, too. Kinzu sighed helplessly. If that's the case, it's going to be hard to investigate. It's not hard to find out who the card belongs to, just find that card opening information. But it's a bit harder to find out who is using the card. Because this is no longer a private matter, you have to retrieve the bank's surveillance records to find out who is using the card. But is it so easy to retrieve the bank's surveillance records? Without the permission of the FBL and the help of the police station, do you want to retrieve the surveillance records? Don't dream. Boss, maybe I can try. Just as Kinzu was flipping through the phone book, ready to find someone for help, Dale's faint voice suddenly rang out. Huh? What did you say? Kinzu looked up at Dale in astonishment. Did he hear it right? Boss, I have a few friends in the army, maybe they can help. Facing Kinzu's astonished eyes, Dale repeated her words expressionlessly. Will this work? Qin Shiang was a little uncertain. After all, Dale has been retired for almost a year, and it is really a question whether her connections can still be used. Boss, leave it to me, how can we know if we don't try? Obviously, there is some uncertainty in Dale's tone. After all, people's hearts are separated from their stomachs, and no one knows whether those guys still remember themselves, which is really a question. Okay, in this case, then you go and try. Although he didn't have any hope, Kinzu couldn't discourage the enthusiasm of his men. He simply waved his hand and signaled everyone else to disperse first, leaving Dale to figure it out. As for James, since he has been caught, let's lock him up for a few days. Anyway, no one cares about this guy, and it's normal for him to disappear for a month. If James knew Kinzu's thoughts at this moment, he would definitely faint in anger. It seems that you caught the wrong person once, and it's all in vain. Instead of apologizing, you want to keep me locked up? Unfortunately, James didn't know what Qin Fen was thinking. When he saw Kinzu had sent everyone away, he thought everything was fine and was waiting to be sent home, but even Kinzu opened the door and walked out. What's going on? Didn't you see there was another one? Unfortunately, no one could answer him at this time. While Dale went to inquire about the news, Kinzu was not idle either. He happened to come to the fishery and planned to go to the bottom of the sea for a field investigation. The catch in the fishery is not much now, and it is almost not enough for the big guys to eat. If you don't think of a solution, the restaurant will probably run out of stock. Kinzu casually found some diving equipment and sent who wanted to go to the sea with him. After seeing that there was no one around, he jumped directly from the dock. Fortunately, this is a more remote dock, otherwise if someone saw it, they would think he was going to commit suicide. Why not go diving somewhere else? Actually come to this deep water dock. Kinzu, who entered into the sea, was like a dragon entering the sea. He did not feel uncomfortable at all. He adjusted his direction slightly and swam towards the fishing ground. Fortunately, the pier was not far from the fishing ground. After just warming up a little, Kinzu entered the fishing ground. Why was he so sure? Just look at the groups of sharks. Damn, why are there more and more of these guys? Scratching his head, Kinzu felt depressed. Is his broken fishing ground so attractive? It's okay when there are a lot of fish, and you come here because there is abundant food. But there are almost no fish here except you. What's the point of you staying here? Roar! After a burst of invisible sound waves, several sharks that were patrolling around found Kinzu. Their eyes lit up, and they rushed over immediately. This kind of lone food is becoming less and less common now, and there is no reason for them to let it go. Oh, you eat me, live on me, and you still want to attack me? Although Kinzu was very angry, he did not dare to confront these guys head-on. He relied on his flexible movements to dodge. Roar! After missing the first attack, the sharks did not give up. They turned their heads not far away and prepared to charge again. However, before they could get into formation, they felt a flash of silver light in front of their eyes. Bang! After a turbulent undercurrent, a shark fell directly and lay on a huge rock on the seabed to die. Silver light. Looking at the manta ray in front of him like a small battleship, Qin Fen, who was about to take action, had his eyes wide open and could not move his legs. What's going on? When did this little guy become so fierce? Could this be the legendary those who survive a disaster will have good fortune in the future? Although it is not a foreign festival, I still wish all book friends a Merry Christmas. Chapter 1050 New Ideas. Bang! Just when Kinzu was a little stunned, the manta ray, whose body length had grown to 8 meters, swung its steel-like wings and rushed directly into the sharks on the opposite side. The sharks that had just been showing off in front of Kinzu were like wolves entering a flock of sheep when faced with the sudden attack of the manta ray. The only thing they could do is to flee in panic. Oh my god, this little guy is quite fierce. On a reef in the distance, Kinzu, who had come to his senses, had a happy smile on his face. He had always had a special expectation for the manta ray. Well, who made him look so handsome? Whether it was Cheese or White Tiger, facing the streamlined shape of Silverlight, which looked like an alien spaceship, they felt that they could not compare. Unfortunately, after so much time, Silverlight, in addition to his increasingly handsome appearance, has actually declined in strength. Especially last time, he was almost killed by several tiger sharks, which made Kinzu a little bit unbearable. So, before leaving, he directly poured a few hundred drops of spiritual liquid into the sky, wanting to see if there would be any special changes. Unexpectedly, not long after this guy really gave him a surprise. Squeak, there was no surprise. After the manta joined the battle, the remaining sharks didn't even have the courage to fight. After dealing with the sharks, Yingguang swung his tail and came directly to Kinzu, circling around him, and occasionally making a few excited shouts. Okay, I know you are good. Smiling and touching Yingguang's big head, Kinzu turned over and sat directly on its broad back. Let's go to the front and take a look. It must be said that after having a mount, Kinzu felt much more relaxed. Although he usually didn't have much trouble walking in the sea, who wouldn't want to have a more relaxed choice? Sitting on Yingguang's broad back, watching the scenery in the sea quickly pass by in front of him, Kinzu suddenly felt a trace of regret in his heart. It would be great if Yingguang could fly. Like the ocean, the sky has always been a place that people want to conquer. Now the ocean is no longer a challenge for Kinzu, so his heart naturally goes to the sky. That's not right. After thinking for a while, Kinzu suddenly patted his head, and his eyes lit up. Yingguang can't fly, but Ha can, and with its size, it doesn't seem to be a difficult task to take me to the sky, right? But that's all for the future, let's solve this problem first. After making up his mind, Kinzu stopped struggling and turned his mind back. His top priority now is to clean up all the big guys active in the fishing grounds. Bang, without any nonsense, after finding a group of tiger sharks, Kinzu didn't make a move, and directly let the manta rays go up to deal with them all. It doesn't matter if you don't accept it, just beat you until you accept it. In the animal world, strength is king, and it is reflected here vividly. Fortunately, these guys are not stupid enough to grow so big. They can accept it when facing life and death. Along the way, Kinzu's team continued to grow. After walking a short distance in the sea, a large group of people followed him closely. An 8-meter-long manta ray with a silvery white metallic glow led the way. 2 killer whales about 10 meters long escorted on both sides. 8 great white sharks with a body length of nearly 8 meters followed behind with their tail fins swaying. Then, hundreds of large fish of various kinds floated up and down. Precious yellow fin tuna, rare bluefin tuna, gorgeous flounder, octopus waving 8 tentacles. It can be said that in the ocean, there are only fish you can't think of, and there are no fish that can't be found in Kinzu's fishery. Logically speaking, Kinzu's fishery should be full of fish in this case. How could there be no catch? But the situation is exactly like this. Not to mention the catch, even the fry are almost gone. After observing carefully for a while, Kinzu gradually understood something. Big fish eat small fish, this is a law among animals. When a large number of large fish came, the fish farmed in the fish farm had no chance to fight back. But the fish farm has limited fish after all. What if there are no small fish to eat and they're unwilling to leave? Then they will pick the ones that can be eaten. Therefore, under the mutual slaughter, the food chain in the fish farm has been somewhat unbalanced. Not to mention the small fish, even the ordinary big fish were attacked by each other and then became other people's food. At this moment, none of the fish following Kinzu was less than 2 meters long. I really don't know whether this is good or bad. After swallowing his saliva, Kinzu turned his head and looked behind him. For a moment, he didn't know whether to cry or laugh. The large sea fish that are rarely seen at ordinary times are just the most common ones in his fish farm. Maybe, the fish farm can go the boutique route. When Kinzu came out from the bottom of the sea, Dale was already waiting for him in the living room. After wiping his wet hair, Kinzu looked at the documents in her hand, and his heart moved. He smiled and asked, "Do you have any clues?" "Yes." Nodding, Dale flicked open the documents in her hand, took out a few photos and handed them over. "I asked someone to retrieve the bank's surveillance records. Every time he withdrew or spent money, it was this person. From this, it can be confirmed that this card is in his hand now." "Oh?" Reaching out to take the photos handed by Dale, Kinzu looked carefully. It was not very clear, but he could still see that it was a man with a full beard. Have you found out who this guy is? I'm checking. Dale held up the messy hair on her forehead. Boss, don't worry, I believe there will be results soon. That's good. Kinzu nodded, and a sneer appeared on his face. Bring it here directly after you find it. I want to see who is plotting against me. Although this was not a big deal for Kinzu, the successive failures still made him very unhappy. Fortunately, Dale never let Kinzu down. Only 2 hours later, when the first rays of sunset in the sky were reflected on the sea level, Comus appeared in front of him with several bodyguards, escorting a bearded white man. Who are you? Why are you arresting me? I'm going to call the police and sue you. The bearded man who was escorted by Comus was not honest. He kept struggling all the way. If there were no bodyguards following him, he might not be able to control himself. However, when the bearded man saw Kinzu standing in front of him, the angry expression on his face froze, and he became a little surprised and incredible. Looking at the expression on the bearded man's face, Kinzu knew that he had definitely found the right person this time. After giving Dale a look that said you were awesome, he smiled and said to the bearded man, I am sure you know me, but I don't know who you are. Why don't you introduce yourself? Findi est captulo muchas gracias por la hasta el final. No se olviden like busgasms contenido exclusivo y exeo inmediato. Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon. Recuerda, cada like, suscripción dona que nos anima a continuar. Gracias a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.